Howdy, folks, and welcome to Retro Repair Roundup, episode, whichever number this is, 70 something or
it's,
other.
It's 100 minus 25 this week.
Right. It's 75! I can do math in my head! Yay! Thank you, everybody, for stopping by tonight. We know that you have your choice of places to watch and go listen to nerds talk for an hour and a half on your Sunday evening, but we're glad you stopped by here. I would like to greet all our cool viewers who stopped by tonight. We've got Jamie's Hack Shack, Mac84, Bob Darlington, who says, "Hey, I know Jeri." And we got CDI, we got Retro Tech or Die, Dave's Vintage Apple Tech, Thomas Armstrong, JVHS, Ian, Jack, Kat, Garth, anybody else I missed? 386, Curtis, Gut Bomb. Yes, all you wonderful people. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there watching who just haven't commented. So thank you all for stopping by. While you're here, little bit of housekeeping. Remember, hit the like button, lasso that like button, and spur that subscribe button. And it helps the YouTube algorithm do algorithmic stuff. But without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest tonight, the one, the only hacker, entrepreneur, pinball wizard, and legend, Jeri Ellsworth. Hi, Jeri. How you doing?
Hey, Jeri.
Do we have silly audio?
Well,
see, we
silly audio again.
So let's dance a jig real quick.
Yeah.
Let's go on while she's fixing the sound problem. But yeah. Nope.
Not yet.
Jeri, in a worst case scenario, you can connect with your phone.
Yeah.
Or we can call somebody that does sign language.
Oh my gosh. We were on Rudy's stream because Rudy had his 60th birthday yesterday. Yeah. And from Rudy's Retro Repair. Okay, she's fixing her camera. But,
please don't go.
So there was a gentleman that he's friends with that's named Dave that kept connecting. And it was a situation where it was just constantly just like, hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? And it was, and I finally just like, I wrote on we can hear you. We can hear you. Because he, I guess, couldn't hear us. So, but.
Now Jeri's back.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear us, Jeri? Can you say things?
Yep.
Now we got camera stuff. Still no audio.
Still no audio. Why? Just why?
It's okay. How about we push forward? We can do gets and things like that real fast. And then when Jeri's ready, then we'll be ready.
Yes.
What
sir.
you got?
Who wants to go first? Ron, do you have any cool stuff you want to talk about?
Why put me on the actually, yes. I got something really cool this week, which was here, let me show you. I have a working image writer, finally. This is this was a little bit of effort went into getting this all going. I made a video about it this week where basically my image writer 2L that has all my networking stuff in it, so that way I could do local talk printing. The power supply blew up, and so I had to go through and recap it and get it all going. And so this week has been really, really great. People have been leaving me all manner of really nice printouts. I got a moof.
Nice.
I got this is from Garth Beagle. There's a autographed Squawkers picture. That's rare.
That's a collectible.
Yeah. I got some nice stuff. Retro Tech or Die sent me a little test message and some other stuff. So I hope this week to maybe do I just very briefly did a little live stream yesterday morning just to kind of test it, and just I've been leaving it on to kind of stress the power supply and all that. And yeah, it's been pretty good. I'm really excited to have it all going.
Cool.
And then also for gets I bought a Switch. Not a Nintendo Switch, an actual Switch, because I've now got too many networking things on this side of the room.
Oh.
So now I gotta have networking. So that's really it.
Cool. I'll go next.
Good.
I was clicking buttons.
I know, I clicked it too.
Yeah, but like I want to click buttons. Let me
Go ahead.
click.
Go for it.
Hi everybody, I'm Joe from Joe's Computer Museum or something. So yeah, I got recent gets. You know me, I don't really get a lot of gets. But every once in a while I'll pick up something neat. And it's usually some sort of weird titling system for, you know, public access television because I have problems. But this time, if it will, that's what.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. So one of the friendos in the Macintosh Friends Discord channel is like, "Hey, look at this cool thing on Facebook," and went and looked on Facebook, and I'm like, "Not only is this on Facebook, or, well, I think it was actually eBay. Not only is this on eBay, it's in Akron, Ohio, like an hour and a half from me. So I'm just gonna go drive and get it." I offered them a relatively low offer for a working set, and they're like, "Yes." So yeah, I went and made do happen. Drove out there and got it. I mostly got it for the monitor and for the peripherals because I have Next Turbo. So I've got, this is just a regular Next Station. I have a Next Station Turbo, is a little more horsepower. But yeah, it all works. The monitor needs recapped and all of that stuff, but it is a working machine. I've already taken the hard drive out of it, used Blue SCSI with initiator mode, hint, hint, and copied that over. And so that is now all Blue SCSI'd and restored. The caps on the inside the machine are perfectly fine, no problems. And the clock battery in it actually still had 3 volts on it.
That's hilarious.
Magical, amazing magicalness. So yeah, I'm not sure what the deal is on that, but it's good. So yeah. I saw Bob Darlington said he has
he's
got a color slab for sale. So Bob, how about we talk later about that? So
hey Jerry.
Hey.
Okay.
Cool. Javier, you want to go next real quick while we're waiting for
Sure.
Jerry?
Just been playing with my little device that nobody can see.
No, I can see it.
Hopefully you can see that. And now I got it. I can make it. Well, if I can see it, I can make it run Macintosh. So that's for my Macintosh.
Neat.
I have a Macintosh working on this little device.
Yep, and gone again. Nice.
And that's it. And of course, I just got from my friend Frodo a little accelerator for my Amiga.
Ooh.
Oh, nice.
So I'm going to be testing it when I get my Amiga power supply working.
Is that for like a 500 or what model is it for?
This is specifically for a 600. That's the only one I got.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
cool.
So that's my new gets.
Very nice.
Cool.
Frank actually recently sent me an Amiga 500. So I feel like I am now I'm branching out in 68,000 base machines.
Yes. All of the machines make occur. Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we here?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, technology.
Don't tell me you had to switch to a Windows computer.
I did have to switch to a Windows machine.
Oh no. I'm so sorry.
So
Here, let me just give me 5 seconds. I need to adjust audio on my hearing side of things.
We have all evening.
I can take up all evening. So where were we?
I think we were introducing you, hacker, entrepreneur, pinball wizard, and legend, Jeri Ellsworth.
I was doing this. Yeah.
Yes. And why don't you tell everybody a bit about who you are, like for the 2 people who are watching who don't know who you are.
I think in the retro community, most people know me from the Commodore direct-to-TV. So the Commodore joystick that you can plug into your television and play all your favorite epics and other games from the 80s. Some folks might know me from my Commodore bass guitar, where I destroyed a Commodore shell that wasn't working, by the way, to make a guitar.
It's fine. It's not like they made 25 million of them or anything.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's there's 24 million in Adrian's basement, so it's fine. You just go get an extra, Yeah,
I think my side closet is on par with Adrian's collection there. And then I think the other thing is I'm a big pinball collector, so a lot of people know me from pinball related stuff, which is when you have the Venn diagram of nerdly retro stuff, it all overlaps really nicely.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
I'm hot from running up and down the stairs, trying different cables.
Gotcha.
So, do you want me to start with my first question?
Sure.
Yeah. So,
Do the thing.
Jeri, what computer platforms did you use as a kid, and why do you feel that the Commodore 64 spoke to so many home users at the time?
So I got started on the TI 99 4A, which was one of our friends of the family computer.
Me too. Yeah.
And I became obsessed with computers at that point. Of course, there was a lot of like movies and things happening at the time with talking computers and evil computers and all kinds of exciting things. So it just kind of led me to this fascination with computers. But ultimately, my father saw this like, obsession with computers, and he started talking about getting a computer. So he would take me to the Sears and Roebuck or the Montgomery Ward's big box store, and we'd walk around all of the showroom area. Yeah. Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm gonna have to go on eBay. Thanks a lot. I'm easily influenced. But yeah, we would walk around and he would just let me like plunk around on computers. And actually it was the VIC 20 is what caught my attention, because they had really big characters. So, when you're like 5 or 6 or whatever age I was at the time, it's the weird things that attract you to different computers. But fortunately for me, my father decided to get us a Commodore 64, which was really taking off at the time. And it was pretty early in the C64 launch. It was around 83 or so, I believe. So I got started on Commodores for some reason, because my dad decided to get that one, probably because he was a little bit of a cheapskate and it was cheaper than, an Apple or something else. But I progressed through, all the Commodores. I ended up with a +4 when I blew up my Commodore 64 multiple times. And then the Commodore 128, I had to weasel some money out of my aunt to get a 128, and then Amigas. Went through the whole Amiga thing, Amiga 2000, 3000, 4000. Of course, I was an adult by then, but even when I was transitioning to these more powerful computers, the computer that I came back to was always my Commodore 128. So I had an Amiga when I was in junior high, I believe. And I spent most of my time using the Commodore 64 because I could program on it easily. It was very manageable. I could do assembly language, kind of hacking around on games and playing around like that and writing BBSs. And, even though my Amiga was there and, I played Shadow of the Beast and stuff on it, but it was my 8-bit machines that I spent most of my time on. Even for BBSs, actually, now that I think back, 80 columns on my Commodore 128 and BBSs. It was so snappy and responsive. It was just a better experience on BBSs than even my Amiga.
Oh, yeah.
No offense, Amiga users, but.
Boo, Amiga. No, wait, hold on.
But boo.
So that kind of ties us into the next question. Makes me wonder what kind of games you played as a kid. You already mentioned one, I believe. And are those games still appealing to you as an adult?
So I got started playing games in the arcade. So the arcades were really a great place to grow up, and we didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid. So it was usually we would go somewhere like the mall and there would be an arcade. My dad would give me like $2 or something. Just like, go have fun for the next hour while I'm shopping for a lawnmower. And so I would go hang out in the arcade with my like 8 quarters. And I would walk around and I'd look at all the games, watch all the other kids play. And it's like, okay, I only have 8 shots at this. I'm going to choose like wisely the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got started on, the classics like Centipede, one of my favorites back in the day. Donkey Kong, which I sucked at all the time, but ate a lot of my quarters. Wanted to like Dragon's Lair and Space Ace when that came out because it looked like a cartoon, but kind of hated it. On home computers, I think it was kind of interesting. My father got me a cartridge with Donkey Kong. We got Pac-Man. These are all cartridges for the Commodore, which I think back is kind of cool that he was getting me cartridges versus like discs and stuff like that. So I played a lot of that in the early days. Paradroid, boy, I played a lot of Paradroid. 001 unit. Going out to all the 001 units out there. And then, of course, I progressed to like more advanced games on the Amiga and stuff like that. But frankly, what I did most of the time is I was pirating a lot of games because I couldn't afford them. And I had more fun trying to like figure out how to crack them. So like borrow a friend's like legit disc and try to figure out how to crack it, or go in and like try to, pause infinite lives or shut off sprite collisions so that I could run through walls and crash the game severely. Stuff like that. I ended up on the Commodore. I got some pretty cool cartridges. Worked a lot of summers to pay for these things, but got some of these cartridges like Action Replay that you could pause the games and then go muck around, in memory and change values. So frankly, I spent more time just mucking around than actually playing the game the way it should be.
Cool.
Very cool. I too played a lot of those things, and as somebody growing up without a lot of pocket change, you did have to. You became really good at certain games because you just by necessity you had to. I could not afford to go play like Dragon's Lair because it's twice as much. It just deplete all your money. I still got addicted to what's that? Cliffhanger though, which was one of the Stern Laserdisc titles. And I actually just this year at VCF Midwest played all the way through it at Galloping Ghost. So I could never have afforded to do that as a kid, but they have the Cliffhanger game there, and I was like, oh, that's great, finally. So
California Extreme, you gotta love it. I mean, I go right back to being a teenager every time I walk in the doors there. For those that haven't been, it's a giant arcade show that's like 50% pinball machines and 50% arcades, and it's hundreds and hundreds of games on both sides of the fence. So all free play, open like from early morning until like way late at night. So
it's really nice that those experiences now exist. You just go in, you pay one price, and just go. There's a guy. There's a pinball place. It's called Atomic Pinball. It's over, I think, in Roxana, Illinois or something. It's about like an hour and a half, 2 hour drive for me, but it's a guy that made a bunch of money in the oil industry and then just like dumped all that money into pinball tables. And you can just go in, you pay one price, and you can play everything from electromechanical all the way up through like Pinball 2000 and all the new stuff that like Jersey Jack and other companies have been coming out with now. So, but to that point, would you agree with the assessment that pinball is life?
Definitely. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I collected, arcade machines. I also collected pinball machines. And over the years, I've trimmed back my arcade cabinets, but I will never get rid of a pinball machine. It's gotten really bad for me. Like I have to pay a lot in rent, so I have a place big enough to store all these things.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but the business benefits from it, so I get to take a bunch of stuff to the office.
Yeah,
and it's funny, pinball machine hold up a lot better than arcade games. I think that goes back to one of the earlier questions. Would I still be attracted to those games today? And the answer is yes and no. So some of the things I would play as a kid just don't interest me anymore. But Centipede, Tempest, yeah, anytime I get in front of one of those machines, I'll play it. But Mortal Kombat, whatever, I'm not going to play that. I'll go play something on the Xbox instead.
Well, I was going to ask, like, because you do have a really large collection of tables. Do you focus more on electromechanical? Do you focus on more solid state tables? Is it more like Silver Age stuff? Is it 90s? What era do you really focus on?
I collect all eras. I mean, I don't go as far back as flipperless machines, but I've got electromechanicals. I've got a lot of 70s and 80s and 90s, and contemporary machines as well. So,
Wow.
There's
of course, they're making so many machines now. I can't and they're getting so expensive. It used to be like, well, there'd be like one good machine, and maybe I'll like drop $6,000 and get it. And now they're like 5 great machines coming out a year at like over $10,000 a piece each. It's like,
yeah,
I can't afford that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a pretty interesting to see the revival. I actually ran a pinball route in Portland as well. So I had about 50 pinball machines on route.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, I would restore them really nicely and put them in bars. And it was a very lucrative business. And it was right at that kind of revival of pinball, at least in Portland, which, weird ass things like that work well in Portland. No offense to other cities, but Portland's pretty damn cool when it comes to entertainment.
There's a place in St. Louis, Missouri that's called the City Museum, which is sort of like this giant kinetic playground where you can go in there and just like you can climb over what used to be a like part of an old bread delivery van or something like that. That's now an art exhibit that kids can run through it, adults can run through it. They've got like a wheelless skate park where kids are just running down ramps, just like tearing muscles and having a great time. But they now have a semi-permanent exhibit in there that is all flipperless tables and
cool.
a lot of stuff that avoided being smashed when the government stepped in and was really concerned that pinball was gambling. Yeah.
Well, that's how I got into pinball was because I worked at a bowling alley, and the owner of the bowling alley and all of his cronies would gamble on the 8-ball deluxe machine. And so they were really good. And so they would rack up to the maximum. It was something, some odd number, like 19 credits, and it wouldn't go any higher. And then they would be like, hey, kid, get over here and like work these down. And then, I'd immediately lose all the credits, but got hooked on pinball. But yeah, I mean, for those that haven't looked into the history of pinball, like the whole semi-legal, not legal aspect of pinball is really fascinating. It's worth looking at. I forget, it's like this documentary. It's something like Attempt to Save Pinball or something with spacing his name. I met him, the guy that went in front of Congress or something, or New York, and just did like the perfect like layup shot of like hitting a target as he promised he would, and got it machines unbanned in New York State.
So of
Roger Sharp. So look up Roger Sharp and like Attempt to Save Pinball or something like. It's a great documentary.
Of all the tables that you own, what's your favorite?
It depends on my mood. If I'm feeling, I like games that are a little bit brutal, so that you're not just there getting the I love you multi-ball all the time, that you have to like work to get a multi-ball. So you have to like, it takes you 3 or 4 shots to actually like achieve a multi-ball. And then it takes you another like 20 times to get a special or something. So I go towards things like High Speed Getaway when I'm feeling really aggressive and testosterone-y. Then if I'm feeling a little bit more chillax, I'll go to like one of my EM machines, like Solar City, which is a fairly slow Gottlieb, where there's 2 levels of flipper location on it. There's at the bottom normal flipper location, then there's a flipper at the top where you have to try to get the ball up to the top flipper and then hit targets in a particular order to get the highest points. And so that one's kind of my zen machine to go to, because it's just super slow and relaxing. And but I don't know, I have about 80 machines, so it can change at any moment what I'm addicted to.
I like I would say kind of for that era, and you're gonna say that this is like such a lame pick, but I really like Scared Stiff. like
Oh,
the
yeah.
Elvira
Mhm.
table, just because it's that there was a bowling alley in my town as a kid, and that was the one that I got to play the most of. So I've got really fond memories of that. Or there's oh gosh, I'm spacing on the name right now, but it's like Universal Monsters, but it's like a party, like they're in a rock band. I
Party Zone or Party Monsters. Or
yeah, it's just
there's a bunch in that party theme.
yeah.
Yeah, all the machines you mentioned, I have. They're
Mhm.
pretty nice.
Yeah.
I can see why Scared Stiff is appealing. Like that's why I go to like universally like panned games like Bad Cats.
Hmm.
It's got like an easy set of ramps to hit, and then you can just get in this flow of
Yeah.
ramp rating over and over and over again. And sometimes that does it for me. I really feel good after like hitting, 20 ramps that are just right in front of like
Hmm.
the flippers,
Yeah.
in a row. On the newer machines, I play my Metallica and AC/DC quite often, stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. It's again, rocking out to some like they put really big, subwoofers in them, so it's sometimes the mood is rocking out a little bit.
Hmm.
Cool.
Very cool.
So, Jeri, like many of us in the hobby, you started out as a kid that looked apart the toys to learn how they work. Was there ever a source of friction with the adults in your life?
Sounds like you've heard my story before. As I alluded to it earlier, like the Commodore 64, we got that, and I didn't understand how our game cartridges worked. So I thought I just looked at the end of the cartridge, and there was like little gold fingers on it. I'm like, well, to make the games go, there must be like connections on this like plug in the back of the Commodore. So I'd stick knives and forks into the back of the
Oh no.
Commodore 64. And it was the screen would glitch out and all kinds of things would happen, and it was like, oh, if I just get the fork jammed in there the right way, it'll like a game will pop up. I ended up destroying multiple Commodore 64s, and it was I was a devious little kid, I guess. I didn't come clean and tell my dad about it until many, many years later. But I just remember him being like, oh, these Commodores are so unreliable. And then he came back with the +4, which was completely not compatible with my game cartridges, which was a bit of a bummer, but had better basic programming, which I loved. As far as taking things apart, I got started super early. As soon as I was like tall enough to like start pulling screwdrivers and wire cutters and stuff off of my dad's workbench, apart came my toys. And I think it all stemmed from I really wanted to. I didn't like not understanding how things worked, so I just took everything apart. Oh yeah, you did too.
Mhm. So many
everything came apart.
toys got thrown away like 3 days after Christmas because I took them apart. Yeah. Anyway,
Yep.
sorry, I didn't mean
Yep.
to go off. Please continue.
No, I mean we have a very similar story. I can remember my father was always frustrated. Like how did this thing break? He caught me a few times with the thing completely disassembled. But eventually, my father, when I was a kid, also, this was amazing. Like, my father was an entrepreneur. Like, he'd been working for a company, and then he opened his own business, which was a repair shop and a gas station. And I got to see him, like, kind of struggle with money and trying to get this business off the ground. But I think to keep me from destroying these expensive toys, what he did out in front of his gas stations, he made a little box that says, "Bring your broken electronics," and then people would just come like put their e-waste in like this cardboard box, and like every like 4 to like 6 weeks, like this big box of like junk would come in, and I would just rip it apart. It was just amazing. I just had an endless supply of like junk to rip apart when I was much younger. A lot of times it was just like greasy toasters and stuff, which were kind of nasty. I can still smell like that
Oh no.
rancid oil smell, but I'd take them apart anyway. Yeah, and just so many memories about ripping stuff apart. My father one time walked into my bedroom and I'd ripped apart a tape deck, and the capstan with the big flywheel was sitting on the floor, and he stepped right down on the capstan right into his foot. So it was not always for the best for my father.
Well, it
But
could have
eventually,
been worse. It could have been a Lego.
I still shudder thinking that I just saw him jumping around and with a capstan sticking out of his foot. Yeah. But what was interesting as I got older, I started getting a little bit more savvy and started understanding what was going on. I was able to actually fix some of this broken stuff that I acquired. Kind of an interesting and funny story is I love to get stuff from flea markets and garage sales and stuff like that. I would take my allowance, which would be just a couple bucks, and I'd go and lurk around and get old stuff. Anyway, friend of the family was having a garage sale, and they had an old beta VCR and all the tapes, and somehow I schmoozed them because no one wanted it. I took it home and it was broken, and I ended up fixing it. And so what I found on those tapes was quite scandalous. And when I went back to the friends of the family and told them that I fixed it, Dad got really nervous that I discovered his porn stash.
Oh no!
Oh God!
Wait, hold on. You found his collection of pornography, or you found his porn stash?
Now that I think of it, he had both.
Oh no! Double whammy.
I mean, it was mid 80s. There were holdovers from the 70s. No, anyway, he asked me, he's like, "Did you look at what's on the tape?" And I was like, "Yeah," and giggled. He was quite embarrassed, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh.
Well, on that embarrassing note, let's move to the next question very quickly.
Sorry if your stream is family friendly.
Oh no,
it's all good. We're fine.
Not anymore.
Yep.
What inspired you to go into business for yourself, selling custom PCs?
Well, I think I was mentioning my father was an entrepreneur, so it was kind of amazing growing up for probably 10 years of my life, watching him go from struggling and to somewhat successful. So I had a good role model. The reason I got into doing computers was I was tired of building and racing cars. So we have to go back a little bit to racing cars. So I was a screw up in school. I actually go a little further back. I'm sorry, this is maybe going to be a little bit long-winded, but I was the nice kid in school that you could make cry really easily. This was junior high, and so kids are starting to become meaner around that time. And I was the victim all the time. And then we got into high school, still the victim. And then my freshman year, at some point, I just snapped, kind of like a falling down moment. I just clobbered this kid with this big book and got suspended because I had the zero tolerance policy. And when I came back, all the bad kids and stoners took me under their wing. They're like, "Hey, you're pretty cool. We saw what you did." And so I discovered that the crazier I was, the more kids left me alone. So I started building this persona of wild and crazy. And of course, my grades followed that just straight down. And this caused a lot of chaos with my father at the time, which I was working at his service station, and he was teaching me about cars and all kinds of stuff. So I was learning a lot about automobiles, but he was really worried for me. And so lots and lots of fights around that. And then I just kept building this persona. I was really gothy and doing all that stuff and getting hauled home by the police all the time for mischief. And in the area that we lived, there was a little dirt track, and this dirt track was kind of a really cool place to go. And my father had done a little bit of jalopy car racing there, just taking an old street car and crashing it around. But I went there and started hanging out with friends. And I'm like, wow, there's nothing crazier than racing these cars. And I didn't want to do like the junker cars that are basically demolition derby. I wanted to do the big cars, like late models and sprint cars. And so I got obsessed to figure out how to do this. And actually, keep the story short, I found some mentors in town. You know, a lot of things I've done in my life is thanks to mentors that taught me, you know, how to do different things, including electronics. Ham radio operators like taught me how to actually work on electronics. Machinists taught me how to like build race car chassis. So I started racing cars, did terrible at first, but then found some more mentors that taught me how to like, you know, set my car up and the psychology of racing. And I actually became quite good at racing cars. And I did that for about 5 years. And so to get to your question, sorry, long-winded, racing cars, building the chassis and selling them is good money. I ended up dropping out of high school because I was just making so much money, but it's a tough business. And so I went over to a friend that I'd gone to high school with, and he was already married, and he was, you know, had a house and everything at this point, and he had made a man cave out in the garage, and he was into computers, and went in there and he showed me his 486 computer that he custom built. And he was saying like, yeah, I tricked one of the distributors to think that I'm an actual like company building computers. And here's this computer I paid $600 for. Normally it's like $1,200 to $1,400. And of course my entrepreneurial gears started spinning. I'm like, that is really good margin. And I don't have to like worry about getting beat up behind the bleachers at the racetrack.
Damn.
And I was kind of like coming out of my like gothy, you know, all against the world kind of phase. And so we started a business, which our partnership immediately fell apart. And then of course I have a bit of an edge to me. So when you piss me off, I get vindictive. I ended up, when our partnership fell apart, I opened a store down the street from him to specifically put him out of business. Of course, I had no money at the time. I'd lost everything, like getting the first business going. And so I dumpster dive to get all the colorful boxes for that, like 3DFX voodoo card and stuff, put it on the wall. And I was doing a lot of robbing Peter to pay Paul to get my computer business going, but I wouldn't be undersold because it was all about destroying him. And so eventually, and thanks to mentors coming through, there was a insurance salesman across the street who was a really nice guy, and I admired him. He was successful, and he's like, you know, swearing in front of customers is bad. You should do that. Wearing like Doc Martens is not very professional. You need to like look the part if you want to actually like sell. Anyway, I started adopting like the things he was saying. It's like, hey, all of a sudden the business took off, and ended up opening 5 stores all up and down I-5 in Oregon. It was a great time. This was 1995.
That was the time to be.
Oh
Yeah.
man,
Yep.
I think back now that like 486s have become like extremely collectible. I think back to like the barrels of e-waste that we were throwing away like monthly, full of voodoo cards and sound blasters and 486 true 50s and all kinds of stuff. It's just like, you know, things were changing so fast between 95 and 2000.
Mhm.
And I mean, I actually behind me, I've got this telecom pack, like I've been restoring. I just took it to VCF SoCal to show it off. Like if something like that came into our shop, like our immediate response is like proprietary garbage. Like can't even use the disk drives. Throw that in e-waste right away.
Yeah.
Man, I could be rich if I had, you know, even a
Kept-
third of what I threw
yeah.
away.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's when I kind of got my start too. I'm not joking. My very first foray into the get paid to do computer things was at Montgomery Ward. Like because they didn't have anybody there that knew how to sell Macintosh stuff, and I was an Apple kid, and so I absolutely could just go in and teach these older people that were used to making $5 to sell a VCR to sell a performance machine and make like $180 on one sale. back when that was a thing, when commission was a thing. But I worked for mom and pop computer stores and helped, and it was always like a thing where something would come up and then that guy would gamble away all the money, or or something, and then it would be like everybody hops boat to the next store, and that kind of goes for a little while. But yeah, that was such an exciting time to be in that business, because it was like every week some new amazing thing was coming out, and there was like the rivalry between these companies, and like 3D acceleration, and just like all the stuff of just everybody trying to fight to scrabble out to figure out what was going to be like the standard for everything.
Yeah, and it was so competitive back then, and I was like, my stores, I was fiercely, competitive. Like if someone tried to open a computer store in like my area, I would just go out to try to destroy them. Like just figure out what they're selling, sell it less, just get them out of there because it's my turf. And but yeah, it got really tough too. Like I remember around 2000, approaching 2000, we're making money like crazy because people are worried about Y2K. And even though like e-machines and all these really cheap gateways and stuff were eroding our margins, there was just so much business to get people Y2K compatible. And things were changing so fast. We were like, buying, I had so much buying leverage with all the stores. I'd be like buy a pallet of like the latest like 3DFX cards, and it was like a lot of money. Like, and I'm in my 20s at this point, like moving like quarters of millions of dollars around, and and riding high too, because margins were really good still, and just I've arrived. Like I'm basically wealthy for a 20-year-old. But it crumbled so fast because like things were changing so fast. Like that palette of 3DFX cards I got, like, oops, well, didn't have true AGP. It only had like emulated PCI over it, and no one wanted it. So now it's like, trying to get rid of this stuff and have to buy another palette. And I also,
if you still have that palette now, it's a new car money now. Then it was we can't give them away. Everybody has figured out that they want to like the NVIDIA and all of that. And
for years I had a storage unit with a bunch of that stuff, but it had a lot of I was collecting like Commodores and Amigas and stuff before it was like cool to do that. Like I would go to like a thrift shop or a flea market, and I'd see like a $2 Commodore, labeled keyboard $2. I'm like, well, it'll go into the trash if I don't take it home. So I had like storage units with lots of Commodores, but I also had like all of this new old stock stuff from my stores when I had to shut them down. So what happened with the stores, 2000 hit, and then like the bottom fell out of the market completely. Everyone that needed to upgrade was done. And I went from like rolling in cash to hemorrhaging so much money per month. I had all this inventory I couldn't move. And eventually it got so bad that I'm like, okay, I tap out. It's just like, I've like burned through the bank accounts. And the people working with me, they were amazing. Like everyone was rallying, trying to find something to make the computer stores viable. We were doing satellite dish installations. We were doing cell phones. We even opened where we could, like adjacent to network gaming centers. So we had our network gaming activities, and
that was one of the last things. That was one of the very last things. The company I worked for before I took my new job in 1998. One of the very last things that we did is they had an online section that they would put computers on a website called onsale.com, where it's like online auction kind of thing. So they were selling like the cheapest DFI motherboards, cases made entirely out of razor blades, just the cheapest crap, the cheapest crap that you could shovel out the door. And we were like, ooh, it's really nice. It's a May case. It's Asus motherboard. It's I mean, the stuff that we were selling locally was really, really great. And when I took the job on there as their lead salesperson, they were trying to sell that other stuff, and it's all they were doing was repair and stuff. And I was like, no, we're going to fundamentally change the business. Well, they're like, well, we can't compete if we do that. And I said, I promise you can, because everybody else in town, we know what their margins are. We know what they're charging. They're making $600 a machine. Right now, with all the money you're having to put in after the sale, you're making $100 a machine. Why don't we just make $400 a machine and never have to see these people again until they want to come back and buy more stuff from us? Transformed that business and made it into something pretty successful. But one of the very last things that we were like, as E-Machine and all that garbage like started eroding the market, we opened up a network gaming center right next door and just had it set up to where it was a bunch of like Pentium machine, or it would have been Pentium at that point, like, you know, Pentium machines with like, you know, dual Voodoo cards. And so it was like high end. You could just come in and play, and we would get people that would come in and do it as a party. And then there was always 2 or 3 people that were like, how do I do this at home? And it's like, well, don't worry, my friend. This sheet right here, it's got all the stuff. It's one price. We'll come out, we'll set it up. And that was the other thing, having to shift away from this idea that you're just doing it as cheaply as possible, that you had to lean in on the customer service thing. So we would come out and set the machine up for people, or they'd buy a printer. And what we would do is we would just go to Staples and buy the printer, and we would take it to their house and set it up, and you would just charge like a little nominal fee to go to their house. So it was just service. But there's other places in town that were just murdering themselves, where it would be like, oh, it's the same Lexmark. You can go and buy it at Staples, and they would just upcharge it $200, and people quickly caught on, and those places went out of business. But
my internet cut out briefly. I didn't hear what you were saying exactly about the printers, but scam, I guess, was the printer cable.
The customer service. Oh yeah, that too. Yeah.
Here's your Lexmark that's going to dry up and quit working. Here's the cable for $24.99. Like,
well, it's a bidirectional cable. Plus, it's got that. It's called that clear coat to stop all the rust. They put that on at the factory. There's nothing we can do about it.
No, we had a similar experience in the company I worked for. We were kind of late to the game. We really didn't start building until around 2000, but we were in the middle of nowhere, so everything here is about 5 years behind. So it made sense. But at the end of all of that, we stopped selling computers. They just the bottom dropped out. The bottom dropped out to even repair. We had to do a complete business shift from just PCs and repair into managed services. It was like in the course of a year, I had to switch the company's entire focus into doing internet-based IT support for corporations, and because it just disappeared. Yeah.
I probably come across sounding like an evil capitalist, but I actually did feel bad for a lot of these folks that were buying like e-machines. That was the thing. It was very similar. For us, we would, there's enough margin. We could, I could stick someone in the company van to go out and set it up for grandma that needed to, do email. But these e-machines would they were selling them for like $199 or something. It was almost at a loss. And someone would come in and they'd have to pay us. I think our billing rate was like $75 an hour or something to work on these machines. And having to tell a lot of these people, like, my gosh, this thing is proprietary, like power supply, it's a Media GX, like we can't do anything with this, like it's totaled. Yeah,
we had a lot of people that would come in with like oh, it's my you wouldn't believe it, like all of the people that would come in with some sort of like little word processor or something, and they're like, can you fix this? And it's like, absolutely. Here's our budget PC, and people, I don't need all that. And it's like, oh no, there's this thing that's called the internet where you can send email and you can get on the web and you can shop and you can talk to other people. And we just had a little workstation. It's like, have a seat. I'll have a sales guy come out here and he'll walk you through the whole thing. And they would sit there and they'd be like, wow, this is just like this whole new world of stuff. And now all those people, probably we wouldn't want them on the internet these days. Those are the people with like, really, I've got strong opinions about things I know nothing about.
Oh my goodness, we caused this.
I know.
We caused
we
this.
made it too accessible.
Oh no. Now I feel guilty. Sorry, everyone.
But I needed all that money to cover my naked ass, so I had to do something.
Oh, there's so many stories around the computer stores. It was such a good time. It's one of, I really have strong feelings about it, because it was a lot of like folks just like us. When I was hiring people, I didn't know how to hire and fire people early on. So it's like, well, hired this person that went to a local community college for computers or something, and they were terrible. But then there was like the super passionate like kid that was still living with mom that would come by and like, hey, you want a job? And stick them in the back, and they're just like hog heaven. Like I'd show up on Sunday when we were closed and they'd be back there like building and like, well, what are you doing? Like, oh, I'm just having so much fun. We got the new Voodoo card in and like it's my chance to try it out. And
yeah,
it
was the only way. It was the only way to get access to that stuff. So young people, especially like kids in the Midwest, that's where I grew up. The only way that you could get access to these things was to have that rich uncle, that was like the guy that ran the degenerate gambler that ran the local computer store. So you would just go and honestly, at least in my little area of the woods, these were all the guys that were just like, that would come to you on Friday and be like, tell you what, I know I just paid you, but if you give me the money that I just gave you, I got a big game tomorrow. If I pay off, I'll double, or you might not get anything. And I'm like, but I gotta believe you that you won. You're not inviting me to the thing. You could just say it. But anyway,
I mean, it was so easy for me to wipe out the competition because it was exactly that. I mean, there was like computer stores would open up. It's like, some guy that, had like some pocket change. Like, I hear these computers are big. Like, I'm gonna make a gamble. And my stores were decent looking. I like made them look okay. And but they'd come in and drop hundreds of thousands of dollars, like building out the facility and lots of like, fancy fixtures. And I mean, they were gone in 6 months.
Yeah.
Like easy to destroy because they didn't know anything about computers.
Right.
So it's like, just undercut them for long enough and then they'll tap out. And
yeah, that's true. It was a fun time. But
and then the gaming centers, that was I really had a good time with those because they trying to lock down the computers to keep the kids from screwing around with the computers was always a challenge. And I thought it was just the coolest thing whenever they would get in and crack our system. So we had like one of the guys that worked for me was quite good at programming. So he made this launcher and it's like, you want to play Quake or you want to do Revolt? And it was just nice pictures and stuff. And then we tried to lock down the machine so that you couldn't like tab out. And they'd always find like ways of like keystrokes to get Notepad open and then like modify autoexec that and get in there. And
we had it set up to where we had like a Netware 312 machine, and we just had licenses for Ghost. So at the end of like every couple of days, we would just go through and you pop a disk in there, boot the machines, and they would just wipe and reload, and then away they go. You're ready to go for next time.
Oh my gosh, you're just taking me back to all these memories. Same guy that did our launcher. We were one of the only like custom build computer stores that had recovery disks. So he wrote a tool that would we'd set it up like they want, and then we'd burn a disk, and then it could recover it completely. Probably if Microsoft got wind of that, they would have.
Yeah, they'd get excited about that.
I mean, we were close enough to Washington that Microsoft would occasionally come in. I don't even know how this is legal. They'd start snooping around, like asking all these pointed questions about like our copies of Windows. And it's like, oh, we would never install a bootleg copy of Windows on a machine going out the door.
Yeah.
Of course, we did.
Code?
Everyone would come in with a machine.
Yeah.
I had a Windows 95 code in my brain for the longest time. I could just type it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because everyone would be like, oh, I lost my Windows 95 disk. And like, okay, I trust you. Like, here we go. 253
Yeah.
whatever.
K44PG WTRX. Yeah. No,
Mhm.
Joe's one of those guys that's got the codes
I have a
memorized.
Windows 98
yeah.
second edition product key memorized because I installed it so many times.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to report you to Bill Gates.
You were talking about burning CDs for customers. At the time when between when I started at these little mom and pop stores and ended at the mom and pop stores, one of the very first places I worked at had a side gig where we would go out and back up computers for businesses. And at the time, we had a Pinnacle Micro CD burner that was not even 1X. This is like really early days. I think the burner was something like $3,500, and then discs were $15 to $20 each. So you did not want to coaster anything because that just immediately erased your profit on whatever the backup was. But it was really neat because the owner had a custom little box that was set up that was just for doing these backups. That was like a 2940 SCSI card and like a SCSI hard drive, because at the time IDE hard drives did some sort of like thermal recalibration and something where it actually would just stop the data flow for a second, and that was enough to create a coaster. So it was like everything. It was like caching, SCSI, or it was like caching out the wazoo and a ton of RAM, and so you could make a CD that the customer could not read, because again, it was such early days that like CD drives and machines could like very infrequently actually read the backup. So it was take the CD, put it in your safe, and if you need something, call us and we'll restore it and bring the files over. That's but believe it or not, law offices loved it. They
I
were
made
like, it's no
so
problem.
much money, like getting these businesses like saving their butts. You know, they wouldn't back anything up. It'd be on their hard drive. Something would happen to the hard drive. And we would we'd stand on our heads, like we'd put them in the freezer, we'd heat them, we would try to, shake them and just like get them to run long enough to recover it. And if we couldn't do it, then we'd send it off to the place that charged you $1,000 to pull the platters out and read it. And every step of the way, I was just bleeding them for money because, and then sold them a tape backup drive.
I'm not going to say the name of the company, Drive Savers, but I do like that they would send the little pamphlets out to people to it was like a bereavement sort of thing, where it was like trying to explain about the data recovery stuff, because we were partnering with them and we get a little kickback if the customer actually went through with all of that. And to take it and just like make it very succinct, it was like they could have just titled it, "So you decided to let us bend you over a barrel." That should have been what the little pamphlet was enclosed, because it was never not like $2,000 in like early 2000s money to recover a single text file that somebody deleted. It was like there were a lot of customers where it's like, okay, well let's do the math on this. Is it better for you to just recreate whatever this is, or actually send this off? And I think people, like, they went through the stages of grief and then finally at the end just accepted that maybe you're just going to have to remake this PowerPoint, you know.
I learned a lot about dealing with people, that are upset at the computer stores. I worked at my dad's gas station, and and occasionally you got like a grumpy person that came through. Now, computer stores, especially back then, it was a quite different like experience for users. So, there was like the folks that lost their data, and so they're being irrational because like they're panicking. But then there'd also be like the class of people that saved for like a month to get that like new whatever sound card or bigger drive. And then they would take it home. They come in on a Friday, of course, take it home, put it in. They're having trouble. They can't get it to work correctly. And then by Monday, they're just steaming mad, and they're going to tell you, how bad you are for selling them a broken video card or something. It was really interesting. It's like, it may have came from my mentor. He's like, got to diffuse them as fast as possible. Like, no matter how irrational they are, just agree with them. Just agree with them. Like, they can't be mad at you if you're agreeing with them. And it became like a game for me. It was so funny. Someone would be like all weekend mad because they couldn't get their video card going. And you just want to say, like, you know, you probably didn't like install the drivers properly. You can't say that. It just makes them more mad. So you agree with them. It's like, oh man, I hate when they're broken like this. And bring your machine in. And of course, a few seconds, you know, resolve their problem. It's like, oh yeah, here it is. You didn't put the disc in or whatever.
The online part of the business I worked at, they were selling the cheapest crap you could possibly sell over the internet to people that were like so there were people that would buy the machines and not opt for a Windows license. And so those people would call in and they'd want support, and they're like, okay, what operating system did you end up installing? I put Linux on the machine. And they would be like, well, I can't make this sound card work. In like 1997, 1996, couldn't make a sound card. Yeah, couldn't make a sound card work in Linux. And it was like, yeah, I can understand why. Was not a trivial kind of thing in those days, especially if it's like some kind of crystal sound chip weird thing you've never heard of. And so finally, what we just did,
a WIN modem.
Oh yeah, you should have bought a LIN modem. That's what it was.
LIN modems, yes.
But so finally, what we just advise the tech support people to do is to offer to sell them a Windows license, and if they refuse, just ask them what contributions they had made recently to the code base.
Oh God.
And so like people will be like, what do you mean? And it's like, well, I mean, this is a community thing. So it's like, you know, you've got something like an emergent piece of hardware. Like, what are you doing to help the community? And it's like, just put that back to them. And we did have a lot of people that would just come around to the idea that it's, if you just want to use it, just buy a copy of Windows for $79 or whatever the little tiny fee. I was like, you're in this far, just, you know, if you just want to use it, it's like, well, who's the person that's going to use the computer? It's for my daughter. Okay, well, how old's your daughter? She's 6. It's like, okay, well, I mean, I'm not going to say that, you know, a 6-year-old couldn't use Linux, but I was like, what type of experience are they going to really have? It's like, you know, it's like they want to play games, they want to do this other stuff. It's not there. Just buy the Windows license. So.
Or get the $45 OEM version that came from who knows where.
Yeah, it's right. Why is all the writing on the CD in Chinese? Whatever, just install it.
Software was so sketch in the 90s too, especially the CD software. Like there was a distributor that would get all kinds of super sketch stuff, like Windows, like for $30 a copy, and they're obviously OEM. I don't know where in the world they were getting these things.
Here we go.
You got an AOL disc in there?
No, I don't, but I do have a really great we had a vendor that was like, oh, we could sell games. And I was like, okay, well, we'll buy some stuff and then you can show us what you got. And so basically they really nice little, you know, like the Seventh Guest, and it's a nice printed little version of the real manual that comes with the game. So not it at all. But it's Peggy 15. They were just selling us like stuff that had been returned from in like British retail. And it just, so it just ended up in the US, like just something cheap because everybody was trying to figure out an angle to sell things cheaper. So it wasn't in the box. It was just discs, but you could get a copy of the Seventh Guest for like $7. Don't tell Graham Devine.
We got so many discs into during my tenure where it was obvious that it's like fake third party. It's like the Windows XP days, and somehow like you would get the product key and you could tell the product key had been peeled off another computer and stuck on this. And the holographic burn on the top side, which is supposed to be authentic, is like all faded at the edges. And like, sure, good job there, purchaser. You did a great job at saving $10.
Yeah.
And going back a little further on my story is when I was a kid, we had this store called Software Pipeline in the area that was a rental place.
Rental software. Nice.
Rental software. A lot of shenanigans happened around rental software. A lot of viruses got on my Amiga too, boot sector viruses. But the interesting thing I thought about, about that situation, is the biggest pirate in our area was actually one of the employees of this store. So he had his BBS, and if you could weasel like enough credits, you could go in and download some of the latest whereas.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Hey, I know we were talking about PC stuff for a long time, but one of your other big things, like, how did you get started in amateur radio?
Oh yeah, amateur radio goes clear back to when I was a kid. So I was interested in electronics, lived in this really tiny town, and we had this little tiny library which had 3 books on electronics, and it was all about vacuum tubes. Like, it was really antiquated stuff. So I was at the library, kind of looking at, the limited selection, and these 2 old guys were like, "Hey, you into electronics?" I'm like, "Yes." And they're like, "Hey, come to my backyard and let me show you my electronics stuff in my ham shack." I mean, it was the 80s. We didn't know anything about safety back then, but
Right.
each of these older guys, they were into amateur radio, and it was really cool, like, hanging out with them. And they were quite computer literate too for older folks. And, being like, I don't know, 12 or something, I'm like, wow, grandpa is really like savvy with doing RTTY on his VIC-20 here, making like interface boards. I learned a lot from them. I also got into doing pirate radio. So I had my pirate radio stations. A neighbor up the road, who was just a little bit older than me, he was also into electronics, and we started building transmitters and having like transmitter shootouts on AM radio band. We would ride our bikes on Saturdays and see how far our transmitters would go, and we'd count phone poles from our house. And we kept building bigger and bigger transmitters to the point where we couldn't ride to the end of our transmission distance on a afternoon. And then we switched to the FM band, which was a little trickier. It was kind of funny. The ham radio operators were super offended that I was doing pirate radio, but also you could tell they were smirking off to the side, like, we got her. They were always like, "Oh, you need to learn the code, and you need to do this, and you got to have the discipline." And of course, I didn't want all of that. So anyway, I always liked radio and stuff throughout the years. And probably, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, I'm like, I should just learn about ham radio and do it. And I've been having a really good time. So for 8 years or so, I've been dumping way too much money into radio. I'm actually close to my ham shack here, which has a bunch of radios. It costs way too much, and I've used far too little and are covered in dust. And
looks lovely across the shop.
Right. Exactly.
I saw that.
We don't know about that.
I actually do most of my ham radio stuff from my RV. So I go out into the desert and like jerry rig up some antennas and see how far I can transmit during gray line. And that's building stuff is really what I like to do.
Talking about building, how did you get started with ASIC and FPGA design?
That was during the computer store days. So I'd always been doing electronics. I was, as a kid, I was interfacing to my Commodores and making I/O cards and stuff like that. And even when in my teens, I tried to make a color expander for my 128 to expand the color palette, which I should do one of these days just to finish it. But then with the race cars, I was building little single board computers to do traction control systems on the car. So it's little 6502 based single board computers to control the rev limiter so that I could dominate. It ended up getting banned, but it's a different story. But then fast forward to my computer stores. Now I'm rolling in money, and like I'm keeping up with electronics in the evenings. And there's these fairly new chips called FPGAs and CPLDs that were kind of within range of somebody to get. It was still quite expensive back then. But I had some money I could splash out. So I bought these expensive tools, bought some of the parts, and started learning about these FPGAs. And actually, my first targets for doing anything with them was the old Commodore 64. So even in the 90s, I was like hooking stuff up to my Commodore because it was so easy to like, well, I'm just going to poke something to the user port or poke something directly into a memory location. And so a good part of the 90s, I was just playing around, learning how to do circuit boards. So I got some of the earliest circuit board layout tools, like got a copy of OrCAD and started doing lattice and design. Oh, nice. And when the computer stores imploded, at this point, I had done a bunch of little circuit boards with CPLDs and FPGAs on it. Some could do sound, some interfaced LCDs. LCDs were like a big deal in 2000 to be able to talk to them digitally. It seems so trivial now, but I/O controllers. I had all these little things that I was just building. And so it's like, what am I going to do? I'm like, I don't have a career anymore. And it's like, well, maybe I can just brute force my way into Silicon Valley. One part of my story I haven't covered, and people can go back and hear one of my other descriptions, is like throughout like these transitions in my career, like everyone around me is telling me, don't do it, just go to school and get a degree. But I always go the more stupid and stubborn path. So going to Silicon Valley and trying to break into startup culture was really tough. No one wanted to give me a chance, but I would just coattail my way into all these different conferences, and I'd go to all the booths and I'd try to figure out who are like the most important people at the different booths. And if they would listen to me, I'd start pulling out like these circuit boards and be like, hey, look, this is a VGA controller I built in 128 macro cells. And eventually I started to get my first gigs after a lot of rejection. And I took it very serious and I worked really hard, and actually kind of got this reputation as like the person you go to if you have a tough problem, because I started to gather also engineers around me that we would just jump from startup to startup and solve problems. So anyway, long story short, it's kind of been a passion of mine to do it. And then ASICs was a natural progression. It's like I was doing FPGAs. Like now I want to do like real silicon. It's like, and that was pretty exciting. So, I mean, probably the most advanced chip that I did was on a team with a couple other people, is the video transcode IC in the TiVo. It was the thing that could receive the transport stream and then crunch it down, put it on the hard disk, which used to be a tough thing to do. Of course, like the Commodore DTV, the DirecTV had a custom chip that I did in it. And I did a ton of toy chips, a bunch of SoCs. So it's just like, create a processor, add all the glue logic and video or LCD drivers onto it and make it really, really cheap, and ship millions of them.
The person that would love that conversation is Tech Knight, because he's back from that era of satellite and like upgrading TiVos and adding hard drives and doing all that stuff. And I had a little exposure to that world too, but not at his level, where he's like, so anyway, when you're decoding the stream and I'm like, okay, you're way over my head. This is super interesting. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I was just the person that made use of all the great discoveries.
I just plugged it in.
Yeah, exactly.
I find it really fun. Like I've done a bunch of these different things over the years, and then people find out and then they contact me and they're like, in the Commodore DTV, there's this register that's documented that says like test 3. Tell me exactly what test 3 does. And I'm like, I don't know. I probably put it in there like one evening because we had a very specific test. Like, I don't know.
It makes sure that you're absolutely prepared for that French exam on Tuesday. It was, it's an insider joke for people that went to my high school. I don't know what to tell you.
It's kind of funny. The chip that I did for the DTV, just a kind of a fun story around that is, so I'd already emulated a lot of the Commodore 64 in FPGAs, and it was kind of like out on the internet. And this is early internet stuff. So, you know, it's not like social media and stuff today. It's like, I don't even know where. I was probably on some kind of like blog and like, hey, by the way, I emulated the Commodore. I'm going to show pieces of it off at some expo. This toy company, through like a bunch of different pathways, found me and wanted me to do this thing. And at this point, I'd only done FPGAs. I hadn't done an ASIC before. So they contacted me and like, hey, we want to get this thing done in 1 year. Can you do it? And I was like, oh yeah, no problem. And I had no clue like what it was like to go from like, you know, an FPGA where if you make a mistake, you just change it, to something when you bake it onto the chip, it's there forever. And that was a really tough year for me, exciting and fun. It's kind of funny. One of my colleagues recently, I was talking to him, I was bitching and moaning because something was tough around work. And he's like, oh, you'll think back in a couple of years, like those were the good old days. Like, and it's funny. It's like so many times, like it was like a brutal like period of time. And then I look back and it's like, oh my God, it was so amazing. But it was really tough, like to get that going. We got the chip done. The poor software team that was helping out didn't have color video out of this thing until 2 weeks before we finished tape out. So I'm like, trust me, color is going to be there, but I got other things to deal with. And we did the toy. It was really successful. There's a whole big story around, you know, how it went viral and stuff. But the thing I thought was funny is, and it kind of ties into like people contacting me about like little minutia of like something I did 25 years ago. At the time, the hardcore Commodore like demo coders and the people making the Vice emulator hated me when this thing came out. There was so much hate coming towards me. Like, this is not real hardware. Like, you know, we are never going to support this in Vice. And I'm like, unsolicited, like, like, I don't care if you support it in Vice. I know I added some like cool, fun things to it, like more colors and higher resolution and stuff. But, you know, why are you coming after me, attacking me? I was just chuckling a couple of years ago because people use it to do demo coding contests like 25 years later. Someone wrote to me their whole story of how they won some European demo coding contest with the DTV, and how it was thanks to like proper emulation in Vice that they were able to like discover some weirdness about the hardware and you know, whatever, make some demo effect. So
that's cool. That is awesome. I am curious if you would tell us a little bit about the process of creating the C1.
Oh, the C1, yeah. So the predecessor to the Commodore Direct-to-TV was the C1. So I had wire wrapped. Any of you know that wire wrapped these FPGA boards, and there was like somewhere there's a picture. There's a stack of it. Looks like, oh yeah, my favorite tool. Those blue tools are the best ever. I've worn out like 5 of those. Maybe I'll get to some wire wrap stories, but no, I'm going to say the wire wrap story first. So I was in Japan a handful of months ago, and Japan has really cool place, Akihabara. Like there's like all these little vendors that are under the rail station. And I go there, and there's this really old gentleman there that has like, you know, wall outlet plugs and different stuff like that. And I look over, and there's like 6 wire wrap sockets sitting there. And I'm like, oh, how much for the wire wrap sockets? And he lights up. He's like, what? You know what wire wrap sockets are? I'm like, yes. And he's like, here, have them. I'm like, no. How much do you want for them? Because I felt bad. Like he's like well into his retirement, and he's like selling stuff under the railway station. And finally, I just had to like throw money like on the table and like, no. Anyway, so I still collect wire wrap sockets today whenever I can get them. They're getting harder to find.
Jeri, I need
Anyway,
to
back
ask
to the
though that after you got them and you put the money down, did you take 5 steps away and then turn around with like, oh, and by the way, was the stall gone? Had it disappeared? If it is, it's possible that those were cursed. Based on my knowledge of Japanese cinema, it is very possible that you are now under some sort of curse. Not one to freak you out, but
Are we like in a Miyazaki film here?
yes,
Yeah.
that would explain a lot of why I'm on the bad timeline right now.
Oh no.
Yeah, why did I end up on the
most
bad
of us are
timeline?
on
It
the
all
bad
goes back to
timeline.
wire wrap sockets. Damn it. Yeah, so the C1, so I was going to expos, and this was probably around 1999 or something, and I was just showing off like this wire wrap prototype. Looked like a little stack of boards that like loosely ran Commodore 64 on it. It wasn't perfect because FPGAs back then were quite small, and so I was really struggling to get everything onto these like wire wrap prototypes. And then I ran into this gentleman in Germany who sells retro stuff, and he's like, I know I've got a source for really low cost Altera FPGAs. And I'd already had started this ATX form factor board that had 2 FPGAs and a CPLD on it. And my concept was you just put it in a case and you can emulate old Commodores and other computers. And I called it the C1. Sorry, I kind of got out of order here. And then I ran into this gentleman in Germany who could get some gray market FPGAs, which were really expensive back then. Like just to barely do a Commodore 64 without a processor still took 2 FPGAs. And then I had the 65816 external for the processor on this thing. Yeah, and it was expensive and not many people wanted it, and we sold a few, and I have a whole closet full of them sitting over here. So anyone wants a C1?
Anyway,
they're there. Yeah.
I got them. Highly collectible, I hear. But anyway,
you got to bring them to like East or Midwest and put them on your table and be like, they're all signed. They're all signed.
I should get rid of them. I mean, I drag them from shop to shop whenever I move, and they're getting more and more damaged each time.
Oh no.
But that ultimately led to the actual Commodore DTV. And of course, at the time, the FPGA, you couldn't do an FPGA in a toy. I mean, we're paying like $20 an FPGA or something. And so to sell a $19 toy, like you have to do all the electronics for about $2. So we ended up doing this on an Atmel process, which was pretty cool. So it was, the way they do it is, it's almost like an FPGA. They define the underlayers. It's a sea of gates. So it's just a bunch of NAND gates just everywhere on the chip. And then all you do is you pay for the number of layers of wiring on top. So, it's like, well, can we get away with, this underlayer with this many NAND gates, and then do 3 layers of metal, and then you can define the whole chip that way. Oh. And we hit the price point, and they sold almost 1 million of those. I actually have a whole like closet full of the chips too. And it's a totally different story.
Hack Fest forever. That would be so fun to hack on.
I keep thinking I need to do like the Commodore Basic stamp or something.
Yeah. Anyway.
So you talked a little bit about how the previous experience with like C1 and all that type of stuff kind of got rolled into the Commodore 64 Direct to TV. But what was like your biggest challenge on that project?
I mean, it was fraught with a lot of problems. So as I alluded to, I think getting it done on time, because the toy industry is very time sensitive. So like there's container ships that you have to get your product on to make a toy viable. So it's got to go to whatever territory. And then So just getting it done on time was really tricky. So, but the other challenge that I had with it was I was so new at doing this. I didn't know how to manage the factory. So I'd sent a reference design over to the factory in China of like how to do the circuit board. And, I assumed they would do what I had shown them to do, but they ended up cost reducing down the circuit board. And so it led to this really tense moment. So the toy company spent millions of dollars making these chips, like hundreds of thousands of these things, sent them to China. They mounted them on this board that they'd cost reduced and they didn't work.
Oh, wow.
So the toy guys I work with were some guys out of New York. And so they're a typical New Yorker guy, like just screamy all the time when you let them down. And so they're screaming at me on the phone, like, you cost us millions of dollars. And I'm like super freaked out. Like, I'm pretty early in my electronics career, like millions of dollars sounded really bad. And it was bad. They're like, you're getting on a plane, you're going to China, you're fixing this. I'm like, if the chips don't work, I don't know how I'm going to fix this. And I was literally thinking like, well, maybe I can just run to Mexico or something and stay away from these guys. Like I was very scared. I got on the plane, went to China and went there, and they had done a pilot run of a few hundred units. And we opened it up and I looked at the circuit board. I'm like, oh my goodness, like there's no decoupling capacitors on this. And so here's the ham radio connection. The ham radio guys taught me the best tool is your finger for debugging. And so feeling things, touching things, coupling noise into things. So I just put my like thumb on the circuit board, which added a little capacitance, and the thing booted up and I saw the Commodore prompt. I'm like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to kill me and like chop me up.
Oh,
So,
Yet.
yeah, and so they just quickly respun the board. It's amazing how fast things can happen in China. Like before I even left, they had like done another pilot run of a few hundred units and they were looking good. And so scariest part was losing angry New Yorkers, millions of dollars, but just getting it done was the biggest challenge.
That's crazy.
Another toy, we did like a Capcom version, a Williams version, but one of them I did this really bonehead thing that's like engineers I work with today, I like harp on them to like check your logs, because I didn't check the logs on the final net list I sent over for this chip, and there was a warning in it saying like, you have not reset this flip-flop. And so they made this chip for this toy, and if you don't reset a flip-flop, there's just depending on where it's on the wafer, there's a 50% chance it's going to start up with a 1 in it, or there's 50% chance it's going to have a 0 in it. So 50% of the chips just didn't work because this particular register put the thing into a bad mode that the software wouldn't run on. And they had already burned a bunch of mask ROMs. So the software was like locked down, and they had like hundreds of thousands of dollars of ROM chips there. And toy company's insane. They just like splash out money and just like trust that you're going to get it right. It's crazier than anything I've ever done before.
I just why have a register that's just who flipped like the RNG on this? Like,
it took me a while to figure it out. I mean, it was like 50% of the toys were working. And I'm like, what the F's going on?
Yeah.
And finally I go look at the logs and I'm like, oh no. And it immediately made sense. Whatever it hooked to was like some video mode or something, or processor mode. And I'm like, of course it's not going to run if it's in that mode. But I'm like, well, maybe I got lucky. There's a scan chain that runs through the entire chip to test it in the factory. I'm like, maybe if I like twiddle these lines, I can get that to reset. And sure enough, I got lucky, like putting it in test mode. And it's a random thing. When they do test mode, there's a pattern of how they reset the flip-flop. So when they scan them out, there's a known pattern that comes out. But I got lucky. So I did something that Bill Hurd from Commodore told me never to do. Never use RC time constants to reset anything. But if you were to open that toy up, there's an R and a C sitting there that just before the main system reset, it hits that and boop. So I got really lucky.
That is really good.
That's awesome.
Anytime I'm hitting a technical issue these days, I just follow Bill Hurd's example. I take my glasses, I kind of perch them awkwardly halfway up my head, and you know what? All my problems go away because now the top of my head is on fire. So I don't have to worry. Whatever the other problem was, just melts away. Thanks, Bill.
Oh, that's great.
And talking about engineers, Jeri, as a self-taught engineer, what resources did you use to gain your expertise?
All mentors, really mentors. Hundreds of people here in Silicon Valley have like passed on their knowledge to me. And, you know, it goes back to the ham radio operators. I had great mentors in the machine shop, taught me how to weld and fabricate chassis, business mentors throughout the years. And then, you know, just getting access to amazing, you know, folks and listening to their stories and eagerly listening to them really help. Something I learned early on is, and it was easy for me because I am eager to hear the stories, is like, you know, there's very wise people, typically on the older side, that have, you know, these stories of like how things go wrong. You eagerly listen to them and engage with them. They'll tell you and pass that information on. So like, I mean, like even going back to doing the Commodore DTV, like, you know, I have this like confidence, which is essential in business. You have to go in with gusto and confidence, but you also have to admit when you don't know what you're doing. And so like, I'm really far along in this DTV process and I'm just doing it as if it was an FPGA, but there's the time I have to start working with Atmel to do this underlayer process. And I go there and I had to like admit I know nothing about what I'm doing and like beg them to take the extra time to help me out. And there's having like gone from startup to startup and even early on in my career like that, like there's a couple tricks I learned along the way to like kind of grease the skids to help, you know, get that extra help, like bring them donuts, you know, you know, yes, take them to lunch. Yeah, people are food motivated. It's a good way to like kind of break that barrier. But I had to go in and admit to these like ASIC designers, like I've never used a Sun machine. I've never used Cadence to do like, you know, back end layout, like help. And you know, they took pity on me and actually, you know, for years I was in touch with those folks and they helped me through my ASIC career after that, you know.
That's awesome.
I love it when I hear stories about people like the mentoring, and there were comments that just flashed by, like Ryan from Everything's Broken Garage, where it's just like our community is largely predicated on the free exchange of knowledge. I would be nowhere in the hobby if it wasn't for people that just took a chance on me.
Right.
They didn't owe me anything. I didn't have anything to offer them, but they took a second to just say, Ron, you're doing a really terrible job. And this is how you do a better job.
Well, technically.
So they so they would go through and show me things and teach me things and all of that. So if we're not making if we don't have like a mentor attitude, if we're not like especially when there's like events and things like that, that servant leadership kind of attitude on things, that I think it's a real disservice to that next generation of people, because there won't be a next generation if we don't make the investment in that like today. So that's awesome. I'd love to hear stories like what you're saying.
I struggle with being a good mentee. I always have. I'm getting better at it every single year. And you know, as I'm getting older, I'm finding out that mentors can be much younger than me as well. Was not the case early on. One thing humbled me recently. I mean, it's hard to have, when you're in engineering, you have folks that come in that can be very blunt and they're like, you're being stupid. Like, and you get your, you know, shields go up and you're like, you know, get stubborn, and you have to like, try not to like put those walls up and, you know, understand that people are sometimes blunt. And, but you know, the thing that kind of humbled me recently, you talked about ham radio. So really these ham radio operators that were encouraging me to have discipline and teaching me their tricks and, I was not ready to have that discipline when I was like 12, 13 years old, nor was I savvy enough to thank them for what they were doing. So in recent years, I think back and I actually get quite emotional thinking of like, they're definitely dead and gone now. And I don't think I ever told them like sincerely how thankful I am.
Yeah.
But I think, myself, I've become a bit of a mentor at my YouTube channel that occasionally I post stuff on. And it's kind of my way to mentor and give back as well. Is you got to plant the seeds, you got to scatter them around. Sometimes you're going to get like people approach you with, kind of negative reaction to what you're doing, but it really is. Hopefully you've planted the seed and then you're long and dead, and they're going to think back and be like, well, now I'm ready to receive that message that
Jeri, as a man, let me explain how difficult it is in this hobby for women. I'll lay it down. I'll make it as easy as possible. I
got stories around that too.
I have no doubt. And that's that's such another important thing, is making places for people that do not look exactly like you and don't think exactly like you and don't love exactly like you, or whatever it might be, is just being like, when people come up to you, if they cared enough to come and say it, like anything, it's like, take that seriously and do what you can to make sure that those people are taken care of. And I think that's so important, especially like you said earlier, darkest timeline. And now more than ever, we've got to do those things.
But don't forget that I have a vindictive side. So just fair warning.
Jeri, I have always been respectful. Please remember, as you plan murders, to keep my name very far down the list.
Yeah, exactly.
I think most people in the retro community are totally safe. Unless you've got that rare prototype I need, then watch your back. Yeah, it's I love our hobby. It's so funny. It's like you have to come at it with humor, because there are a lot of right and wrong ways to do things, and it's all perspective. It's what I think the right way to restore a computer is completely different than others. And sometimes people get all huffy, like we talked about the C1. I remember being a little bit discouraged with the C1 because I was really trying hard to make this little board that could do emulate vintage computers on FPGAs. It was way too early, and I wasn't ready to take the criticism, and it actually kind of soured me a tiny bit on the retro scene, because I don't know, a Commodore fan's like, well, if you're not emulating the 6502, the illegal opcodes are going to be wrong. This is bullshit. Like what am I going to do? And I was taking that really personal, but
what are you going to do? Pound sand with that nonsense, I guess.
But being female in the tech industry, you get thick skin over the years, and now it's really funny. And my current business, being CEO, I'm doing a lot of engineering for the current product, but I actually have to raise a lot of money, which is super male dominated and super misogynistic. And I find it completely funny now, when people are just way over the top, dismissing my ability, or it's interesting. There's different industries.
To be a fly on the wall when you reply to them. Oh, I would love to be there.
It's fun. Well, we can have a whole discussion at some point about venture capital. I've gotten really snarky with them, and it's funny, the more aggressive you get with them, the more they respect you. But I don't know. I lost it. I was going down one path, but I will tell a story of something that helped me thicken my skin a lot. Going to trade shows early on, trying to break into Silicon Valley, was tough. I was in my late 20s, probably, quite cute, 30 pounds lighter, and had done a lot at that point for my 20s. I'd already run a couple businesses and designed a bunch of stuff. So I'd go to these trade shows and I need to get a job. I'm like starving to death. I had no job. And so I'm maneuvering my way through trying to get to know people and network, and everyone's being super dismissive of me. Like, someone's got a Tektronix oscilloscope there, and I'm looking at it and they're like, are you with one of the other booths? Like, you're here with your husband, the typical stuff. And
You can use this to figure out when the laundry's done.
yeah, saying all that. But I developed these things to keep me sane that was quite fun. So, early on doing that stuff, I would just these people would start talking down me, like looking at an oscilloscope, for example. They'd be like, this is an oscilloscope. I'm like, oh, can you tell me more about it? oh, yeah.
And then you ask them to have some real time-based correction selection setting deep in the firmware that you already know about, just to see if they know their own product. That would be
but that was part of my thing to keep me sane. Is I'd just let them dig a big enough hole, and then I'd be like, "How many points does the FFT have?" And then they'd be like,
"Oh,
yeah."
So it was kind of fun. But on the flip side, being female in a male-dominated industry also has advantages too. So like I played roller derby, and I would go to a trade show. I'd be the woman skating around, on roller skates at an electronics event. So I got to talk to anybody. Anyone would talk to me. And so that's how I got to network. I found mentors. It was, so it's not all bad. I know what I was going to say. I'm old enough that I've been in a lot of different industries, and I got to see the sexism in different industries. And it's kind of interesting when I look back and evaluate. So racing cars, obviously horrible, right? Especially when you're stomping their asses and winning all the time. And I won a lot. But the retail computer store business, no one cared. I mean, it was great. Maybe it was because I was carving my own destiny there, and I was the boss and everything. But great, it was great. New customers coming in, like I had the situations where they're like, I always got a kick out of this. Like, I know Jeri real well. He said that he would give me a deal. Like, really?
Yeah, okay.
Those kinds of things.
Hold on, let me get my porn stash real fast. Jeri here. How can I help you?
I got some beta tapes I can get you. Some good stuff on it.
Wow.
Then the electronics industry wasn't too bad in general. But then there was the things you would be in meetings, and I learned how to modify the way I had discussions. Like, you'd be in an architecture meeting, and women often say things like, I feel that we should go this direction, and I quickly recognize using things like emotions, which we tend to lean towards. It's bad in engineering meetings. You need to be very definitive, not wishy-washy. And so that was good to kind of learn, how to modify my speech. But in general, not too bad. Most of engineering that I've done is we got a job, we got to get it done. As long as you're pulling your weight, no problems, right? Yeah. Toy industry, the best. They don't care. You could be an alien from Mars. We really have this tight schedule. You better get it done. And we don't have time for any of the nonsense, which was super cool. Video game industry, probably the worst thing I've ever been involved in. It's I don't know. I've been trying to figure out why it is. I think it might be it's male dominated. A lot of guys just never matured past playing Quake in their basement. It was pretty terrible.
Wow.
Anyway, sorry, I don't want to be a downer. We can talk about something upbeat.
Let's talk about the video game industry one last time. Why don't you tell us about augmented reality and how it can be leveraged for gaming?
So I worked at Valve Software. So I set up their hardware R&D department, which was pretty amazing. So Gabe Newell gave me a blank check to just spend as much money as possible and hire mostly anyone I wanted. And so we put together this dream team, and he gave us one mission, and that's to bring people together playing video games in the living room. Because Valve Software, they have the Steam platform. So if you play PC games, almost all games are distributed through the Steam platform, and it makes them billions of dollars per year. And when Windows 8 was due to come out, they had this Metro interface that they were trying to push. And the Metro interface did not allow third-party stores. You had to buy everything through Microsoft Store. So that was a crisis for Valve. So if Windows 8 and the Metro interface took off, then they would no longer be able to sell games on the Steam platform, and they would be bankrupt. So our goal was to find them an escape route into the living room. And Gabe has this concept, is like right now games are kind of all these different silos. You got hardcore gamers that are doing shooters, and you have like the casual gamers, and you have people that played games in the 80s but don't play new games. And he's like, there's got to be a way to get the whole family playing games together. And so that's where we spent ungodly amounts of Gabe's money. We got all these military head mount displays. We had, you know, depth sensors, all kinds of stuff. We were just free to explore everything. And I had created this like clever optical system to do AR, augmented reality, where it was inherently group play. So it used this clever optical technique and special reflective materials that you emit your light and it comes back to each user. And that by far in our hardware lab, people would come and just sit on that machine and play the dumbest games ever. Only because you could do it with like 3-4 people at a time. So they'd play the dumbest things. I'm like, well, this is it. This is how we like bring the whole family together. And things didn't work out at Valve. There's all kinds of drama there. And they ended up firing me and a bunch of other people in this big riff. And I ended up going to Gabe Newell, like really mad at first. I was going to like chew him out. And I was in tears at one point because I was so emotional because I'd seen like this AR experience and how good it was going to be. And I just asked him, like, you should just sell me this technology. And so I actually bought this optical technology from Valve and started, you know, an AR company. And that's what I've been doing. Shipped our first product. Probably a lot of people watching because of the retro angle picked one up. So thank you for supporting us. You know, we have some new stuff coming, which is exciting.
So those who may not know, what's the name of the product?
Oh, yeah, shameless plug. Tilt 5, all spelled out.
Yes.
And don't worry, since we're doing some new stuff, the old stuff is compatible. So
that's good.
It's the Commodore 128 of AR.
Oh, nice.
There we go.
I've been having a good time. It's
proper link. There we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't come on here to pitch Tilt 5.
But
everything's good.
We always ask the people do. It's because it's one of those things where it's like, tell us about anything you want to tell us about that you're working on. So
yeah,
I had a funny thing happen about 6 months ago. So I met up with the founder of Woot, you know, who's doing something else, and he said, "I can't wait until Tilt 5 is on Woot." I'm like, wait. That's where everything goes to die. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I just want one sheet. Sorry.
Yeah. It's like, listen, you guys go ahead and unload all your ooh-yahs and just leave us be. Thank you.
It's been kind of fun being in the, you know, the video game space and being kind of on the bleeding edge of like AR. I've got to like kind of fly in these orbits of like, getting to know Tim Jennison, get to know Jensen at NVIDIA, and you know Gabe Newell, and you know some of these like folks I would have never had access to. And I got to work with Tim Jennison at New Tech.
Cool.
That's very cool.
Cool. Well, I think we have gotten to the end of our
we got a lot.
questions.
Yeah,
however,
we
have almost
I didn't bore you guys to death.
Oh
with all
no.
the PC store.
This has been awesome.
This has been really
I've
great.
never said that.
We've
Just
got a lot of
waiting.
questions from people that
Yeah, we have like nearly 20 questions from the audience. If you still have a few more minutes and want
Hey,
to
I'm
answer some questions
here all
from
night.
from the
All
group. One Bit Fever Dreams, who is one of our compatriots in the vintage Mac area, as you can tell, we're kind of into the vintage Macs around here. One Bit Fever Dreams asks, "What's your favorite SID chip trick?"
Trick? Is it trick?
Trick.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, when I was doing the DTV, I had to reverse engineer the SID, so I really got into playing with the SID and testing all the things. I really like ring modulation. I think having like multiple oscillators like kind of beating against each other creates, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a texture to the, especially when you have these phase accumulator, the oscillators that are, really close in frequency. So you have these things that are wawing against each other.
Oh yeah, the kind of
on square waves and stuff when you're, I forget what it's called. I can see it in my mind. I can see all of the circuitry that I built, like how all the different oscillators get combined, but I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, there's some really fun square wave stuff where multiple oscillators interact with each other.
Cool.
The SID, a quick story on the SID and the Commodore Direct-to-TV. The chips were so small back then, the ASIC that we were going to use, and they had no analog. So I couldn't do analog for the filters. I devised a way to do it with some multipliers, but multipliers are big. So then I spent a bunch of time doing a word serial multiplier that could do the multipliers, to do the filters that we needed. And I tried so hard to crunch it down and make it fit onto this little tiny ASIC. But things were way too primitive back then. It was 0.5 micron. So, I mean, it wasn't that dense of a chip compared to the original Commodore, which was probably like in the 2 micron, maybe 4 micron size. So anyway, the DTV went out without filters, and it's probably why these Vice guys were so mad.
So
I did add the circuitry there. You can add it externally. So there.
That's right. I remember reading about that. It's like, yeah, you can do this, and it's the like here are the test points you can tap into, and there it is. Have fun. Yep. Curtis Boyle asks, was Jeri on FidoNet?
I was on Fido. I hope no one's archived that though. I have an old CMD hard drive from back in the day. I wrote my own BBS program. And a few years ago, I was looking through that. It's just quite embarrassing, the stuff from my teens that still resides on that hard drive. And probably the stuff I was saying on FidoNet. I thought FidoNet was pretty cool. So I was in the Salem, Oregon area, and we had some local BBSs, and a bunch of us of all ages, and again, we knew nothing about safety back then, got to know each other on the BBSs, and we'd meet up to go roller skating or have Taco Bell and stuff like that. But, people would move away, and that kind of pulled me into getting on FidoNet, and it was just kind of cool. You'd send off the message, and then like 2 or 3 days later, you might get a response. It just felt so futuristic, where our other option is like, and of course, Dad's not going to let me use like telephone to call these people, or I wouldn't write a letter.
Bill Martins asks me to ask you about Barbie and the "Don't worry, be happy" fish on the wall. Sounds like an inside joke, but okay.
So I worked at New Tech. It was pretty cool. This was in the mid 2000s. So New Tech did the video toaster on the Amiga, and then later they did a bunch of 3D software that saved their butt, and I think a bunch of Star Trek shows used it. And they developed a PC version of the video toaster in the late 90s, and then streaming video came along, and it was going to be a big thing. And I got hired to work with NewTek to do the FPGA board that took all the video in so they could stream it out. And it was a thing called a TriCaster. So I helped them design the TriCaster. So I'm working at NewTek on a video streaming box. And in 2006 or something like this, or 7, I don't remember exactly, streaming was like super new, and it was not easy to do at all. And so they were making this box, you just plop it down and you can stream. So I'm like, well, I need to learn about this streaming thing if I'm going to be working on a streaming box. So I set up a home lab, my hardware lab, with one of the TriCaster prototypes, and just started streaming 24/7 from my hardware lab. And everyone thought I was like insane. It's like so common now, no one even blinks twice. But back then, I was doing this weird thing. So I'd have this camera going and just engaging with chat as I worked on things and worked on projects, and kept building it out. And people would contribute. So one person contributed a speech bot. So it would go to the IRC channel, turn it to speech so that people could talk to me. And then I got some pan tilt zoom cameras, and then we interfaced the chat to the PTZ so people could move the cameras around and try to zoom in on proprietary things I'm working on.
You hear that, Twitch? She invented it.
Well, at the time, there were some other pioneers. So there was Twit, This Week in Tech, that was also doing a lot of this stuff. And I was like going up and visiting Leo Laporte on Twit. And it was so funny. Anytime I would go like visit him, and they were running NewTek hardware too, he'd just throw me on like, okay, you're going to be on This Week in Mac. I'm like, I don't know anything about Macs. Like, just go on. They love you. They love you. Just go in.
Yeah.
Just have an opinion. So there were people pioneering it, but not too many people were kind of live streaming their life. And so that's what I was doing. It was pretty interesting. You could feed my beta fish called Master Beta. And
I get it.
You could play YouTube videos to the fish, all kinds of stuff. So we built it out. The question was,
Barbie. And the fish on the wall.
I made, what was Barbie called? I took her torso out and I attached her head directly to her butt. I called her something.
Oh my God.
So it's just legs and the head. And then eventually I burned its hair off with thermite or something.
Oh my gosh.
On a live stream.
That's great.
Went along with my Thermite Me Elmo stuff that I was doing as well. And then the talking fish got adapted to the chat room too. And I was living in Portland, and my lab was right next to a bar. So that was quite fun because people would get drunk at the bar, and at like 2 a.m, all kinds of things would be happening outside. So at one point, I think we put a knife in the mouth of the fish, which had a speaker hook to it. So the chat room could direct their audio to the fish, and they could also send commands. And so I put it out on the porch and let the chat room like threaten the drunks going by with kind of like the insult dog with his cigar.
That's so good. Oh, that's great. That's funny. I love it.
There's a bunch of that stuff on YouTube. A lot of it got taken down. I mean, that was early days. So it was on Justin TV and Justin TV, and what was the other streaming? We streamed to two of them. And YouTube, you could only do like 5 minutes or 2 minutes or something. It was completely worthless.
Yeah.
And then when YouTube expanded out where you could do long form videos, I kind of quit doing the live video streams and just started doing long form video. And plus I'd run the course of having people like kibitzing to me constantly. It was kind of cool though. I'd be working on projects and be like, people would just be, they would log in and they would just talk to each other. So there was this constant chatter, and people liked it because they could be at work and they could just be listening, you know, in the background on the stream and chatting with each other. But then I'd be like, oh, what's the pinout for, you know, this particular chip? And it was like 100 fingers going. And then within seconds, you know, it'd be in chat and it'd be read out to me what the pinout I needed for this particular chip or whatever. It was pretty neat.
That's awesome.
Cool. I'm going to skip a question, go to this next one. I think it's a little more salient. Would you say that this one's from Ian Scott, known as Polpo in the group? He recently did the Pico Gus and the Image Scribbler local squawk cards. He once asked, would you say that reverse engineering when you developed the C64 DTV was harder than it is today because of access to tools, technical documentation, people in the community, and so forth?
That's a great question. As I think back to reverse engineering, thanks to the Vice guys, I've been railing on them all night, but the Vice guys, being able to look at what they were doing in the emulators was super helpful for reverse engineering. So, but what they were doing back then is like, I don't remember all the details, but I would kind of laughed at some of the stuff. They were detecting special cases, and then they would, you know, solve for that through brute force. And when you're actually doing like a gate level emulation, you know, you can't like rewind time, right? You can't go back and like fix a special case or edge cases on stuff. So you have to get it right. And so the challenge I was having back then was we were so constrained for gates that I couldn't do the things that people can do today. Like I look at people that emulate processors, they do it as a giant case statement. I'm like, oh my God, it's so inefficient. It's like, you just put every opcode and every possible combination in a giant like case statement and let the synthesizer try to optimize it down. What I was having to do back then was actually, you know, do the buses and the pipelines for like the processor accurately. You know, I had to really worry about like, you know, in the 6502, there's this PLA that decodes like the opcodes, and that's where all these illegal opcodes come from, because it's like that feeds into the sequencer that then feeds into the ALU unit, which then also feeds into some muxes that are feeding it either out into a register or out onto the bus. And so I had to mimic that really close. So I was like, I actually had an ALU and I had the PLA and I had all of the functional units there. So it'd be as small as possible. But this was a CMOS process. So some of the stuff that was happening like in the 6502 could not be emulated in CMOS. So inside the 6502, they had these wired OR kind of buses. So you have this unit and it just drives stuff onto a bus, knowing that nothing else is going to drive onto it. And you don't get that luxury in, you know, a CMOS process because you don't have internal tri-states or anything like that. So then I'm struggling with, you know, trying to keep it small where I have to like make a bunch of like giant like muxes to switch things in and off of these buses. And same thing for the video chip. It was just kind of the same thing. They took advantage of a lot of, you know, internal tri-states, multi-phase clocks, things that just weren't legit to do. So I had to actually build out a little bit more logic on it. There were some other weird things too that were quite challenging that kind of on the same like special case scenario that I had to like actually do. Like a lot of the illegal opcodes on the 6502 is just like driving stuff onto the external bus and assuming that it floats out there for long enough that, you know, a couple like cycles happen on the opcode, then it comes and reads it back, and the bus is just floated for that time, or drives it out and then reads it back. So actually, you know, what's kind of fun about the the C64D TV, and this actually got me in trouble on a future project. It's like I emulated the external bus so closely that when I went to revision 2, I think it was revision 2 of the DTV, we actually had to add some capacitors to the external bus because I was assuming on my FPGA emulation that I was okay, like the bus would float long enough. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting way down in the weeds, but
Oh no.
yeah, I'm envious. I'm envious of like folks that can do emulation now. Like I would totally do like a giant case statement to like do a processor. It's a whole lot easier than like trying to like, you know, why is this rotating right? And then also adding to the accumulator, like how in the world is this data like flowing through the processor? Then of course you have folks like Tube Time, Eric, who have completely reversed the 6502, which man, that would have been really handy back in the day to figure out what's going on.
That's awesome.
Sorry, that was rambling.
No.
I'm staring at my 6502 road sign on the wall and geeking out. You're fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Good.
I was gonna say, you're in the right place for all of this.
My license plate is 6502, Jeri. It's 6502.
So I mentioned earlier, and I haven't talked about this much before, but you know, when I was a Commodore kid, you know, Atari people, Spitooey, like, you know, I'd fight you on the playground. But like even going back, I mentioned like I was trying to make a palette extender for my Commodore 128, and what was really cool with the DTV, as soon as I got like the kind of base design going, I was like, if I were to design something extra, what would it be? And I added all kinds of stuff to the DTV, especially revision 2 and 3, which was for the European market and a re-release in the US. Added a blitter with transparency, higher resolution, more colors. Yeah, there's some stuff on the SID too. I think you can like drive 8-bit samples out. It's been a while. It's just like there was on the revision 2 and 3 version of it. There's actually a bug in revision 2, which we quickly, very few revision 2s made in the world. We quickly did a flip and got revision 3 out. But I remember working with the guys at Atmel, and I was a little more savvy about doing chips at this time. But they got frustrated with me because I was constantly like submitting new net lists clear up into the last minute. Like I'm trying to add one more little like feature and Easter egg into it. And they're like, you gotta stop. You gotta stop. Like
we have to run the machines here. We got to make silicon.
I'm like, no. I found a way to optimize like 3 gates out. I can fit one more like register. Oh, we got in so much trouble adding Easter eggs to the DTV. The programmers in particular are the ones that caused it, but I took the blunt force trauma of when it was discovered. They added pictures of us drinking beer with Jim Butterfield, which this is a kid's toy. So
yeah.
Then there was like a game where you do, it's called Cliff Diver, where you have to like try to kill yourself jumping off a cliff.
Oh no, yeah.
The toy guys got wind of that and they were pissed because there's like, you know, the kids rating.
We don't need a scandal.
That's what actually drove all the sales, is that it was hackable. Like they sold out instantly and almost none of them went to kids.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's like all
we don't need another coffee hot coffee.
The hot coffee. Current and topical Joe.
Anyway. Moving on. One Bit Fever Dreams asks a second question. Did you stay on the Amiga side or Commodore side in the early 90s, or did you jump ship to MS-DOS PC side? And he asked because you can almost point to 1993 as a moment in time when the ship jumping happened over to the 486.
Yeah. So I liked Amiga a lot. I had at my Monmouth store, which was my headquarters, I had a totally decked out Amiga 4000 on the network, or no, with a modem. Correction, no network on it, on modem, with a Picasso, I think it was Picasso aftermarket VGA video card. And it's been so many years. I had this thing all set up. I actually had it kind of like stuck in a corner. It was one of my bigger locations. So I had this thing over in the corner. And then the rest of the store was like, there was a pinball machine, and then it was selling PCs. And I always thought it was funny because people would come around, and I'd have my Amiga there, and they'd be messing around with the Amiga, and it was just so much snappier than some of these like PCs, like, you know, having the hardware sprite for the mouse. It just felt better. And people are like, "Can I get one of these?" I'm like, "Well, unfortunately, that company's out of business." You know. But yeah, you know, I was, even back then, I was kind of educating people on the ways of the Amiga, even though it was like long dead. I mean, we were all holding out hope. Like in the 90s, late 90s, I was going to AMA West, which was a bit of a travel for me from Oregon. And then Cincinnati, I think there was a show, going there hoping that Gateway Computers would actually like turn around Amiga and bring it back. So it's like talking to the Gateway Amiga folks and Joe Torre and those folks. Like, it's funny. So I got into doing retro stuff in the 2000s, and my only interest was like 8-bit stuff. It's like I'd given up on being mad at the Atari guys. I started collecting all of the machines at that point, and not too interested in like going and getting heavily into collecting Amiga stuff. And one of my friends, we were having a discussion about it, and it made a lot of sense why he wasn't interested and I wasn't interested. It wasn't dead enough. Like, the thing with Amiga is there's always like this hope it's going to come back from the ashes. And what made like the Commodores and Apples and all that stuff interesting is they were so dead. Like, we're not going to ever have a new Commodore 64, and then the DTV comes out. But and my collecting journey, kind of to add to that a little bit, is now I've collected everything like common, like just have pretty much everything common. I've got like 50 million Commodores and Ataris, and my garage is full and my closets are full. Now I'm into like, you know, telecompacts and AES 103s and Philips P5020s, like these computers that are immensely boring, but have weird form factors, or nobody collects them and no one knows anything about them. And that's what I took to VCF SoCal, is I brought a bunch of my bizarre, unloved machines. Brought a Minolta PCW1, which is the world's widest computer, I think. It's got a built-in daisy wheel printer, and then two 5 1/4-inch disk drives side by side, and a built-in monitor.
Yeah.
AES 103, which there's only like 2 of us in the world trying to like restore these things. Supposedly it can run CP/M. We've only been able to find the lame word processing software for it. We're hoping, anyone, if you have CP/M disks for the AES 103 or the communication software, I want to get this thing on the internet. Same thing for the Philips P5020. It's basically a word processor, but supposedly you can run CP/M on it. So there's a couple of us in the world that are trying to like revive those machines. Executel, another one I took down there. The DeLorean of executive computers.
Oh, and then it tries to sell the FBI cocaine? Is that how that works? Okay.
There's a little trap door. That's where you keep it.
This is where you put your stuff.
Oh, God.
So that's where I'm at now. It's like I'm starting to feel like Usagi getting all these business machines.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Still, it
getting
makes
excited.
it's for the furtherment of knowledge, because if people don't put the effort in to investigate these things, eventually we're just going to be at a point where nobody knows. And it's harder the longer time goes out to figure some of these things out. So it's super important for for like a preservation point of view to just be the person that's like, you know what, I'm going to figure this out and document it and put it online and try to get other people excited about it. That seems like the Clint thing, though. But for Clint, it's the trash to eBay millions pipeline is what it seems like at times. They'd be like, now everybody wants one of those things.
Yeah, he's just pumping and dumping.
Yeah.
I should have kept all that really like crappy stuff from my computer stores, and I could have just coordinated with him to pump and dump.
Yeah. It's like, hold on, everybody. Actually, when our friend Ian was getting ready for the network or for the Local Talk cards to make a modern reproduction of the Local Talk cards for the image writers, like about 3 or 4 weeks out, I was like, you know what? If you've been wanting one of them image writer 2s, probably ought to pick one up now that they're basically free. And so it's like, so a lot of people now are scrambling because they want to get one because they're going to buy one of those cards.
There it is.
Joe, that one doesn't work as well. You might want to put some components on it.
Yeah.
Maybe
these blanks, they just, I
know. You're going to want to discrete that up.
Oh, hey, if we're plugging things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Stop
I know.
bits.
Yes.
The stop bits.
Yeah, they're good.
Yep.
Yep. I hear they're coming to a retro conference near you.
I know.
Absolutely.
They're going to have to look out because I hear that there's now another group. It's called the Start Bits that is wanting to start some rivalry with those guys, much like Jim and the Holograms and that other band whose name is escaping me right now, even though I've seen every episode, the Misfits. That they're going to be like the Misfits to the Jim and the Holograms. But we'll see how that works out. We'll see if anybody gets the reference, and then we'll get we'll get costumes after that.
Then they're all going to be copied by some dumb boy band called the what's the Parody Bits, and it's just going to be bad news.
No, it'll be a Weird Al knockoff, the Parody Bits.
There you go.
Oh, I love it.
The new bits in the block.
Perfect.
Yep.
Ron, do you want to select the next question? There are so many good questions, and I don't know which one we should pick.
Yeah, Gut Bomb wants to find out. Hey, do you have a Space Cadet pinball table? the joke being that's the pinball game built into Windows.
I was actually going through my funny story about pinball. Like, you get a bunch of them and then you start forgetting that you have them. So I was at California Extreme and I'm playing a machine a few years ago and I'm like, God, I love this. And it was for sale. I'm like, I should buy this. And someone next to me is like, you dummy, you already have one. I played yours. I'm like, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Space Shuttle, not a great table. Black Hole, really great table.
I just got a haunted house.
Oh yeah.
I like it better than Black Hole because it's a little less punishing when you get down into the lower playfield.
Yeah, into the cellar. Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know, haunted house, Black Hole are very similar. So haunted house has haunted house theme, and it's got an attic, which is an upper little tiny playfield with 2 little flippers and a pop bumper and a bunch of drop targets. The middle playfield with the traditional, semi-traditional bottom flippers, except for it's got like a weird layout. And then it has, in reverse direction, a glass window with a little playfield with 2 flippers underneath that you flip towards you. It's really a brain fuck.
Ooh,
tricky.
It's excellent. I've been waiting to get one forever, and finally I got one. And of course it melted down. Typical System 80, like all the solenoids started catching fire. Yeah. So I got the joy of fixing it. That's half the fun. It's like fixing them. Kind of funny, when I was collecting a lot of these machines, I was putting a lot of them on route in Portland, but I was also like collecting like weird ones. Like I have a lot of weird ones just because they're bizarre. I'd get them off Craigslist back then. And the running joke was, if it's like works perfectly, it's going to be a basket case. And it was just so funny. I would like drive 6 hours to get this semi-rare weird machine, and it works perfectly. And I get there and they're like, yeah, I don't know. I just turned it on and it's just not working now. It worked like last week. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I'll take it.
Yeah.
And you get it home and there's like no solenoid on the eject hole or something. It's like, this thing's never worked since they owned it. Like, but it was just always funny. Another funny, like picking up pinball story, and this has a Wozniak connection to it, is so, I got to know Wozniak down here. It's kind of fun, occasionally getting to hang out with him. But for years, he had these metal business cards when they were kind of special and new. And so he gave me one, and I put it in my wallet, and I drove like way out in the middle of nowhere. Oh, nice. Is it perforated down the edge?
Can't tell.
Woz makes
frames,
those.
Can't really tell.
Woz is a prankster, of course, but he goes to the mint and gets sheets of $2 bills and takes them to a place that can perforate them and make them into little binders that you can, sticky back binders, you can peel them off. And anyway, so I had his business card. I go out to get this pinball machine, and I struck up a conversation with this guy, super nerdy, and he's like, do you know Woz? I'm like, in fact, I do. And I pulled out his business card, and he's like, can I buy that from you? And I'm like, well, you got this other pinball machine over here. Like, will you make me a deal on it? And so I don't know, he gave me $100 or $200 off on this machine to get Woz's business card. So I got back and I wrote to Woz, and I'm like, you're gonna be mad at me, and if you get a funny phone call, it's because I made a deal. And he's like, I would have done the same thing. And he's like, remind me to give you a replacement business card when I see you next.
That's nice.
Very nice.
Related question from Everything is Broken Garage. How do you store it all? Pinball machines are so large.
That's a great question. So I'm in a house with 2 really big garage, roll up doors. There's a big living room area down below me here, which has probably like 20 machines in it. The bedroom has a machine in it. To my right is my Tempest machine. The living room has my Asteroids Deluxe and a haunted house in it. The guest bedroom has my cocktails machines, cocktail arcades. And then the other guest bedroom has about 5 machines in it. So the thing is, the pinball machines, when you fold them up, and this is part of the reason I forget which machines I've got, is because they get folded up and then I get densely packed. So you fold them up and then you stack them on end. And then if you get really creative, sometimes you can get take the head boxes off and throw them up on top of the machines when they're tipped up, and you can get them even more densified. Of course, my shop, I have electron microscopes and plasma etchers and all kinds of welding equipment.
As you do.
Yeah. Ion beam lines. Like, I'm quite a nerd. So, that's why I pay way too much for rent. I need to move out in the middle of nowhere and just get a giant ware home.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Schaus, where I don't know, ware home makes me think that on at a big full moon that your house turns into a condo or something. I just
what I should do is when I retire, I should just do a nerd bed and breakfast. Like, do you want to stay in the electron microscope room, or do you want to be surrounded by your favorite Gottlieb pinball machines?
Oh no, you need a room that just has Pinball 2000. So it has episode
Jar Jar?
1. Yes, and you do not turn them off at night. So it will be, if you can make it till the morning, your stay is free.
Oh man, I do have the Jar Jar Binks Pinball 2000. It's so annoying.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of the attract stuff on it is
Yeah, I won't go there. It's terrible.
Yeah. Now I will say that the Mars Attacks table that they did that was a good concept. That was probably like neat to play. For people that don't know what Pinball 2000 was, it was sort of the idea was that you would combine video games and pinball into one thing, and a better idea than like Baby Pac-Man, where you had a video game and then it was like if you did a certain thing, it dropped down to a pinball table. But the whole thing is it uses Pepper's Ghost. There's like a CRT that's kind of mounted above the table, and it projects, or you kind of see the reflection down on the special glass, so you could interact with like virtual like things being projected from the monitor. So it's a neat idea, but yeah, it didn't go anywhere. It didn't save pinball.
The real sad thing is I had an opportunity, but only had enough budget to get one of the two. So this guy had both of them, and I was not getting it to route it. So it wasn't like I was getting it necessarily to play. And I went for the Star Wars one because it's like, well, it'll be more collectible, and maybe I can scrounge some money and get the Mars Attack one. And it was gone by the time I got some more money.
Yeah. For people that have never played that table too, it is like it was designed at a time where everybody was fully convinced that Jar Jar Binks was going to be the next Chewbacca or the next whatever. Yes, like they really like did not think that through. They overestimated.
So the torso. So there's a little Jar Jar Binks toy inside of it, like bolted to a post, and his torso fell off, his legs fell off. It was just his head there for a while. I got him glued back together, but oftentimes the ball, like air balls, like flip it around, and he like turns upside down and stuff in there.
That's awesome. Oh, we still have several questions left. I want to make sure you're okay for us to keep going.
Bring it on. I need some more light in here, though.
And the only reason I asked is because, wow, 2.5 hours, folks. This has been great.
Yeah.
I hold records on some podcasts. I think I went like 3 hours on EEV blog and held the record for like really long time.
Well, let's break that. No, let's not. So let's just pick. I'm going to pick one at random here that sounds good. I'm going to grab this one from Ian Scott. He's asking, how do you balance running a business like Tilt 5 and finding time for retro stuff? Yes, please tell me, because also having that problem.
Oh, yeah, it's tough. I mean, so when I was just a staff engineer at places, like I'd work more than a 9 to 5. Like when you're doing engineering, you always do more, but because you love it and it's fun. But I would have a lot more time to do my YouTube channel. I was more active on YouTube back then. And I was doing a bunch of like, the pinball collecting and routing. And I was doing a lot of stuff, and it was just all stuff I really love to do. Running a startup is really time consuming. Like it's quite frequent, like 80-hour like weeks, like because as the founder, you have to like pick up like any slack. Yeah. And I like it a lot. It's fun. It's like even raising money, which is really a nasty process, is entertaining. And so I find the whole process like as entertaining as when I was a staff engineer somewhere, like, and having plenty of like free time because there's always something new. But the way that I'm dealing with it right now is I try to dedicate weekends to myself and not doing YouTube because it slows down the projects. I just build, repair, and do everything I want to do on the weekends, and maybe I'll blue sky, some pictures if like I'm not, tired at the end of the day. And that's what I do. Like this weekend, a group of us bought all of XS Solutions TTL chips and analog and transistors when they closed down, and then we split it 3 ways, and because they were just going to sell it to a gold scrapper or something. And so that took us like a lot of evenings to get all of the chips split 3 ways, and then I got them all like packed away, and they're like nicely stored now, so I have 3 lifetimes worth of repair parts, and for all my friends too. that need a particular part, thousands of parts. But there was like this bin that as we were sorting, it's like there was a loose chip. It would just go into the bin. And I ended up with this bin of like hundreds of loose chips. So all weekend I've been sorting the chips by TTL, by op amps and analog, unknown, and like getting them all sorted out. And what I'm making is a go kit for going to like these different expos. So I'm putting these little folding cases together where I have like the common parts. I have some DRAMs in there. I've got like inverters, like all the stuff that's going to go bad at a show. So it's going to be my little go kit with, and I'm going to put some like Commodore PLAs in there. And I just want to make this little dense thing that I can throw in my bag when I go to Chicago or VCF SoCal.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my weekend, was making this go kit. I'm really pleased with it. Now I need to find like a good desoldering method.
Mm-hmm.
That's like compact that you can take with you type of thing, or
yeah. I mean, I have my solder pult, but it's a little big, so I'm thinking that I need a small soldering iron, a small solder pult, solder wick, all the stuff.
if you find a solution, let me know.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question from Ian Scott that I think is somewhat related, because you were talking about Blue Sky and what you're doing in your free time. He asks, a few months ago, I saw you post on Blue Sky a board you designed with an NES, a CPU, and a Pi Pico. Anything you can share about it?
No. That's a super secret project. I have 3 super secret projects going right now. 2 of them are sound related, one's Amiga related, and I don't know if any of them are going to work. And part of the reason I'm keeping it secret is, so I can tease it, which is kind of fun, but they may not work either. So,
so basically what you're saying is watch your social media constantly until the news comes out.
I'll bring it to retro events. Like one of the Amiga projects, super ambitious. Like I'm almost certainly going to face plant this one. So an interesting thing we talked about all the DTV stuff. The toy company had commissioned an Amiga version of the DTV, and I had it all running in FPGA, but it got canceled. That was really a bummer. So the Commodore had gone so well. They thought they could make a go of it with the Amiga. And but there was a very small window where these plug and play toys were popular, and they kicked off the Amiga one just right at the end. So that would have been really cool. It would have flopped big time. So it was the right decision to cancel it. But
cool.
And it was tough back then too. This was 2007, so I was having to put the 68K processor and then all the custom chips into something that could fit on one of these, ULA chips, which was going to be tight. Part of the problem we had back then, going a little techie on it, is like there were some bigger chips, but they did chip on board when they did these toys. So they bond the chip down, and then they do the bond wires, and then they glob top it with epoxy. Mm-hmm. And their machines are really old in the factory, and the bigger density chips that we had to use with the Amiga, which we actually used on a different project later on, but the bond pads are staggered. So there's an inner row and an outer row around, and their machine couldn't fly wire over the top. And so it ended up being like this huge fiasco. Like, how are we going to program these machines to get, the wires out? Anyway, sorry, that was super boring, but it was an interesting challenge that we had, was like coming up with like a way to make 1970s quality machines do something fairly modern, which is the case in some of these factories. It was kind of amazing. You go to China, and sometimes, their warehouse is just dirt floor warehouse. Like, started off making like printer cables and turned into a toy factory at some point.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's funny how all that stuff goes. It's Mark from MacFX talks all the time about just the challenges of dealing with some of these manufacturers and some of these companies where it's just like you explain and you can provide as much documentation as you want, and they will still come back with like, well, we tried and it doesn't work, and it's like, well, wait, well, hold on, like let's discuss this.
Have the working prototype,
right? And it really just comes down to that we just didn't want to do it. You know?
Yeah, it's always challenging. You have a language barrier and a cultural barrier with like Chinese factories. They always want to be very agreeable. So a lot of times they'll be shaking their head like, do you understand? And it's like, yeah, we understand. But they're just being agreeable, which is kind of cultural. And then the language barrier. And then, a week goes by and you come back and it's like, this is nothing like what we agreed to do. And I've learned some tricks along the way. So if you ever have to do like this, and I imagine it works with other territories from China too, it's like, do not send messages with paragraphs, of information. Everything is bullet points. Like 1, solder the connector. 2, check connector, whatever. It's very simple because it's just like us trying to, if we got a big glop of Cantonese sent to us, like we're going to have a hard time interpreting it.
Yeah. We might. It's like, listen, I bit the wax tadpole, but now I don't. What's the next step? I don't understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Javier, would you like to choose the next question?
I don't have it in front of me. What do you ask me?
Go to the starred chat in the.
I'm looking at it right now.
I see his Apple IIc back there. Is it a plus?
I got all.
It's Javier, so it's all
one of everything. Yeah.
I just replaced my plus. I don't know how it happened. Somehow, when I moved from Portland down to Silicon Valley, certain things out of my collection were lost. My plus was lost. No. I lost my SX64, and like someone must have grabbed it off the back of a tailgate or something when I wasn't looking. I just I picked up a plus at VCF SoCal, $80.
Oh my God.
So if you're a serious collector, people need to get to SoCal. That's well, maybe I shouldn't tell you. Don't go to SoCal. Leave all the deals to me.
Yeah, leave all the deals because I will go and grab them all.
Stay home. Don't. Yeah.
But you can get some of these oddities on the cheap at SoCal. It was good. Maybe it hasn't been tapped as hard as Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, needless to get 2 or 3, but not that good. You're right.
I will say VCF Midwest, there were a few booths that had really great prices on things because they understand how the game works. I brought it here to sell it and I want it gone by Sunday noon. And there were other people that had some very aspirational pricing on things.
Oh yeah.
That packed every last thing up and took it right back with
I got to send Susie to college, and I have ideas of how I'm going to do that.
It's one of those things. I remind people where it's just like, hey, I'd like to purchase this, and it's like Saturday morning at 10 a.m. and they'll be like, oh no, I got to get this, and it's like, all right, I will be back to see you at 1 o'clock on Sunday, and I want you to be ready to deal. And so you come back and you're like, here we are. Well, I got to get this. And I was like, I understand that. But I also understand you got into this event for free. You might have paid for the first time ever, paid $20 for a table. You got room to move on it. Well, eBay prices, well, guess what? Listed on eBay.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
So there's only one other group more frugal and cheapskates, and that's ham radio operators.
Oh, then you want to say Coco.
Listen, I can probably reform all of these capacitors. That's fine. I'm not giving Mouser any of my money.
Yeah. But yeah, it's anything you need for Apple IIc, let me know. I think this is a good one because I'm
gonna make you cry. Just real quick, I'm gonna make you cry. Before everyone was really collecting stuff, I got my hands on an Apple with a zip chip in it, and I decapped it and ruined it. And the other thing, and we were able to recover from this, I needed an 65816, so I removed mine. I needed the socket too, so I removed the socket from my Transwarp GS.
Oh.
Yeah. So
It's
you can hate
okay.
me forever.
No. I remind people that complain about that are like, I can't believe that you used a C64 case to make a guitar. I can't believe. Tell you what, you start paying my bills, you can absolutely decide how I spend money on things. But look at it
Exactly.
like this. If there's one fewer in the universe, what'd that do to the value of yours? Now shut up.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and don't worry. Yeah, it can be. There's a lot of zip chips still.
These were made in the millions.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Don't feel that.
Yeah, and don't worry, because one day it's going to look amazing in a tip out back of your grandkids' house, because it's all e-waste.
Yes.
It's all e-waste. Just have fun right now. Stop worrying about
Exactly. We're just
Yep. When I die, they're gonna have to like bring in a bulldozer and just dig a pit and just push it all in. No one's gonna know.
They're gonna do, they're gonna take every one of those. You're gonna have a tiny pyramid made out of Gottlieb tables in your backyard.
Just throw me head first into one of them and bury me in it. That's
right. They're gonna be on top of your grave.
I posted both those pictures back when I was still on Facebook. Get off Facebook, it's evil. But it was quite humorous watching people. I just revive that post every once in a while to rage bait people. Like, look what I did. Like,
There's always, everybody's gonna have an opinion on everything. Don't worry about it. I've done
the trans warp is back. Trans warp works.
That's good.
Yeah, and the zip chip, there's ways to redo it.
Yeah,
and there's going to be more.
Or at this point in the game, just buy a faster machine. There's a lot of people that get all wrapped up where it's just like, oh man, I just bought a accelerator for this thing and all that, and it's like, right, but you spent like $400 on this thing. You could have just bought the newer model that already has the stuff.
I tend to be a purist. Like my collecting has gone from like, oh yeah, I can whatever bastardize machine this way. And it's like, no, I do need those caps in there. Yeah, like I'm getting kind of weird.
I got two C's that one has a special drive, another one has special memory card, and this other one has special thinking. And then I got tons of things with just one special thing inside them. Yeah, we get crazy on that.
Sorry, I took us on a tangent.
No.
You're good.
So the question is, Jeri, when something sparks your curiosity and imagination, how do you usually approach it? Do you dive fully right away, or do you prefer a few minutes here and a few minutes there?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it depends. Like many of us, I have a garage full of half-done projects that I don't have enough time in my life to finish them. So there are things that I'm curious about where I can reach like this partial finish state of the project. And I'm like, I've learned everything I need to learn. I don't need to take it that last 5%. And I'm good with that. It's like, I'm done. It's going into a box and I'm going to open it 5 years later and be like, oh, yeah, I was doing that thing. So I have a lot of those. Actually, part of this like go kit that I was doing this weekend is I went around my lab and into the guest room where I have some inventory stored of chips and stuff. Every little bin where I was doing something where there's some random stuff, I'm taking those out and I'm like sorting them and trying to deal with like the half bins of stuff that were associated with the project. But then there's other things I get obsessed. Like the Philips P5020. This thing, I saw it on eBay and it was close. It was like in Sacramento, so I could get it pretty cheap. And it's a really heavy machine, and I'd never seen one before. And almost no one online, except for a couple museums, are talking about this thing. So I got it and I had it shipped over. It came smashed. Fucking eBay shippers.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
1 in 3 of my stuff comes smashed. So this thing came smashed, and it's all like got these die-cast parts. So there's like the base is smashed. And then I open it up and realize it has a mud line inside of it.
Oh no.
So it had been lived outside at some point and had sunk into the mud or something, and someone had just hosed it down on the outside. So it looked okay on the outside. But I got obsessed with this thing. I'm like trying to research it. No one knows anything about it except for just a little bit. And this thing I should have thrown it in the dumpster. It's bad. So I got obsessed. It was like 6-7 weekends in a row. I just spent every single day restoring this thing. The circuit boards, every socket, there was galvanic corrosion, in every one of those I had to replace every socket, and there was a lot of them. A lot of the chips, the pins had corroded off that were in the sockets, so I had to put all new chips in it. Luckily the ROMs still had stuff in them and weren't destroyed. And then the disk drives were full of water, so all the motors and spindles were seized, but these were proprietary. They were not half height, not full height. They were some weird Phillips in between thing. Very interesting too. Single-sided 96 TPI, which with a 50-pin interface, which is not an 8-inch disk interface, something else. So I had to completely rebuild those. So I was making adapter plates on the lathe and mill to adapt modern motors onto the
you do.
Yeah. Onto the disk drives, got those going. And then I finally got the thing trying to boot. Oh, and all the Aquadag had fallen off the monitor. I had to repaint the Aquadag on it. First time I powered it up, the tantalum started catching fire on the board, so I had to fix that. It was an insane thing I was diving into. And then I get it, it's trying to boot, and it has error 01 or something. And finally, okay, now I need to find software for this thing. So I'm going all over the forums looking for it. And I found this one guy out of Sweden. He's like, my father passed away recently, and I remember using this computer as a kid, and I've got the discs. I'm like, oh my God. So I wrote to this guy, and luckily he wrote back, and he's like, well, unfortunately we got rid of the machine because it was just this giant monstrosity.
Yeah.
But I got the discs. And so, but he was really reluctant to send them to me. Nice guy, but reluctant. I'm like, please, I'll archive the data off of them if I can. I'll pay for it. And finally I got the discs, got them imaged. So now we have copies of them on, the internet, potentially, once I reveal that link.
Jeri,
but, I mean, it was such a journey. It was awesome.
Jeri, but my father was a rather prolific serial killer, and I'm just worried that what might be on these discs.
It's quite charming what's on the disc, because apparently his father had taken it home from work, and this is a super boring business computer. And what's on there is his Nintendo wish list. So there's a Christmas wish list.
Nice.
That's a cool.
There's some pen pal letters to someone in, some other country. Very charming, 8-year-old kind of stuff on there.
That's really great.
But I need the CPM discs. The project's not complete until then.
So you've received your commands from your internet mother internet. Make occur.
Yeah.
Yes.
Find it.
To AES 103. Philips P 5020. I'll accept P 5040 discs too, but supposedly there's a museum in the Netherlands that uploaded their disk images. So now we have a Dutch and Swiss or Swedish version of the software, but their CPM doesn't work, at least on my machine. I'm telling you, I'm going down into this Usagi insanity.
Yeah, welcome to our hell. Yeah.
Do you also have the daisy wheel printer for it and all that?
Oh no, but I'm making an adapter. It's a crazy printer. Do you want to hear something about crazy printer?
I love printers.
Yeah. I was talking to Al Caso the other day. He's like, nobody collects printers. And I'm like, I do. He's like, you're insane. So the AES printer is a very unique printer. So it's by Qumi, but it's not Centronics. It's something almost Centronics. So instead of just sending, line feed and carriage return, which advances paper, you actually transmit through this protocol the actual print head's distance and paper distance. It can go backwards, forwards, on the carriage. So it's this really weird interface, not super well documented. I found like a data sheet for, some other QME type printer. And so I've been trying to take a Raspberry Pi to intercept this weird protocol and try to emulate it out to Centronics, and not having much luck yet.
Wow.
But anyway, yeah, that's my next, I'm still obsessing.
Your next
I love
obsession?
it though. It's a cool looking machine. So
it's Jimmy Carter's favorite computer, apparently.
Oh wow.
Like he wrote his memoirs on it or something.
Him and Peggy Hill ought to get together. They can.
It's a very ET phone home. That's what drew me in on that one. I've been kind of obsessing on getting computers with phones attached to them. So the Executel, I just got the Action Station terminal. Phones. Another question for the community. I've got the Telecompact. I'm trying to find the handset for the Telecompact. This thing's amazeballs. Look at the ergonomics of that keyboard. You can take it down.
Thank goodness.
There's a promo picture I found out somewhere where they actually showed like a secretary like typing on it that way.
Oh God!
It was like I don't know. We're gonna have to like change the angle on this keyboard. It's everybody's putting in carpal tunnel. Work comp claims.
Yeah, was this funded by the International Carpal Tunnel Surgeons Association?
Oh no.
Oh, somebody sent threats to Ron's printer.
Yeah.
Live on Retro Repair Roundup. Global Talk is talking.
Nice, I love it. What's funny is I went to SoCal and I brought the Minolta with the Daisy Wheel printer. That was the thing the kids loved to play with. I just brought it up in word processor mode, and just kids were super fascinated with, and it's like
computers used to make noises.
Yeah.
And then my Executel, it was kind of funny. So the Executel is a really interesting machine. I probably shouldn't talk about these because I'm still trying to find a pristine one. But so don't bid against me on eBay if one comes up. There was an executive unit that the executive would have on their desk, and then they had the secretarial unit. And I didn't even know about the secretarial unit. And the secretarial unit is really a kind of a dumb terminal. It just talks by a serial to the executive's computer, and then through a coax, you would route the video back so the secretary could access, the executive's day planner or whatever on it. Anyway, I ordered this thing, imported it from Europe, and it came, and it was, unfortunately, eBay smashed. The picture tube was smashed in it. And then I got it. I'm like, what the fuck is this thing? It doesn't have the micro tape. It's just, this is the super rare secretarial unit. I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing with the CRTs busted now? So I ended up converting it to my Skype machine or my teleconference machine for work. So through the handset, I have a mini PC inside of it. And then I made a decoder that could decode this weird protocol that it did over serial to do all the keystrokes, and then the handset. And then where the CRT was, I found the right size LCD to put in there and a little webcam. So it's my video phone.
Awesome.
And the keyboard works. So it's pretty great. Anyway, I took it to SoCal, and there was like this super, nice.
Oh my God.
I had one of these hooked up to my point of sale in my computer store. I used to get these printers and hook them up. The Impact printer for.
That's funny.
Of course, Windows didn't have good support for the graphics functionality. Anyway, these young kids installed Minecraft on my Executel at the show.
Figures.
Yeah. It was quite
Jeez.
fun. The old timers walking by, like seeing kids playing video games on this thing. They're like, "What?" They're very confused what was going on.
At least it wasn't Roblox.
Yeah.
Well, they couldn't figure out a way to
Maybe it
redeem all
was
the
Roblox.
gift cards.
I'm old. It may have been Roblox.
Oh no.
I don't know. I can't remember.
So, Everything Broken Garage is asking, Jeri, do you have a Sim 1? And if you don't, would you like one?
Of course, I would like one. I have 2 blank Sim 1.
Ooh.
Someone stripped all the chips off of them, so I haven't repopulated them. So actually, at the office, I have a museum set up, and we just moved offices, so I'm just getting it reset back up. So throughout the office, we themed each of the conference rooms. So there's like an Atari room, there's a Nintendo room, and then there's cabinets all through the office with different stuff. So I have a cabinet which is like game consoles, starting in 1972. So it has the Odyssey 1, it has Odyssey 2 in there, the ColecoVision, all of those kind of 70s machines. And then there's right next to it's an Atari cabinet, which is like Atari, they cracked the code. And my story as I walk like VIPs through, it's like the startups are the ones that, figure out what consumers want and not the big companies. And I point to like, we have Magnavox, we have RCA in this cabinet, and all these big companies, Coleco. None of them really figured it out, but Atari, on the other hand. And I also have a cabinet, there's tons of cabinets with stuff in it, but I also have a cabinet full of just circuit boards. And so I have Kim 1, I have the Sim 1 in there with the boards all stripped out. Thank you for offering to send it to me. Maybe we can connect afterwards. It'd be really fun to have in the cabinet. But I have a cabinet full of dev boards. So I have a Cosmac board in there. I have a Jolt, which was the dev board that was used to do the Atari 2600. I also have rare chips in there.
Wow.
In Chicago, I managed to pick up, it was Texas show. I picked up the Pocketronic prototype that was used in a lawsuit, the first ever pocket calculator. So the chips that were used in it and all the documentation for the lawsuit, pretty interesting stuff. Anyway, that stuff's all on display. And then I have, everyone loves my cabinet of failures, which is, everything you can imagine that's a failure. I offended Bill Hurd because I had a +4 in there, but.
Oh no. Oh.
But it has all kinds of fun things in there, like
Only you.
the General Magic Link, it has Q Cats, it has even more modern stuff like the Essential Phone and a Super ACAN game console.
Cool. Well, I think that we've reached a critical mass in this show this evening.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of gotten to a good spot
Mhm.
where we can say we had a great chat. You have an open invitation to return.
Yeah.
Maybe I could return sometime we could theme it. I did a theme recently at a private event I went to, which is talking toys from educational toys, primarily talking from 1972 to mid 90s, which people liked a lot. And I was just kind of looking over the edge here. They're still all sitting there. So if you ever want to do something weird, like I just start bringing out my oddities, like the Centurion learning computers or the
you can show us your fabulous Fred. I just remember like Mego, like in the 70s, it was just like a little board, had colored little keys, and you could program it to play games or play songs and things. That didn't have like a speech synthesis, but it was like
I burned all my Elmo. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thermite my Elmo. Yeah.
Yeah, happy to come back. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for indulging my long-winded stories. I'm happy to come back on. I can, if you want to see weird stuff, I can theme it up for you and show you some stuff. And we'll keep it shorter.
Oh, I had a great time.
Absolutely. So, Ron, do you want to take us out with one last question?
Oh, the last question is always this. Jeri, where can people find you online?
Blue Sky, Jeri Ellsworth, Jeri, and then Ellsworth. And you can look at my YouTube channel, Jeri Ellsworth. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jeri Ellsworth. No other social media besides those now.
Yeah,
I've trying to get back on the good timeline.
Yeah, I've whittled it down to Mastodon and Blue Sky.
Yeah, gosh, I wish I could get behind Mastodon. It's too Linuxy for me. I know it's
I think people complain it is the technical hurdle of entry is really high for a lot of people, and I think that's why Blue Sky has succeeded with that federated model, but like in a much easier to get in the door kind of thing. So
yeah,
I'm only down on Linux because it screwed me over 3 times tonight trying to get on the live stream, and I had to go back to it.
Hey, all you Linux lovers, just remember, if Jeri can't get the audio working in time, you can't either. So that's just how it is.
I literally spent like 15 minutes before I jumped on there. I'm like, I don't think the audio is working, but like, oh, maybe when I log on, I'll see the VU meter move. And I'm like, it shows that it's connected.
Thank you, Jeri, for validating me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And generally, I like Linux. Anyway.
I like Unix when it's on a Mac.
I just got the AT&T Unix machine.
It starts with a 3 or something like that, isn't it? Like
yeah. That one built in.
Number.
Yeah, I just got that one. I'm learning about it. Another request for the community: if you have a mouse for that, I'm trying to find a mouse. Exceptionally hard to find. Anyway. 3 hours. Do I have a record? Did I break the record on your show?
We did it. It's not the record.
Absolutely.
Yay! All right, I'll let you guys go.
Right. Well, it's again been a great pleasure having you on, Jeri. We'll have you back on in the future. And again, thank you to all the awesome people who stopped by tonight to listen to Jeri's awesome stories and to just hang out with us tonight. Remember, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, do all of those things. And we will see you again in 2 weeks. Good night, everybody.
Yeah. Oh, are you gonna pitch who we got? Joe?
Who is it? Yeah, it's here. Our next guest next time is going to be Aaron Giles, developer famous for porting LucasArts titles to the Mac and writing the classic program JPEG. So don't miss that show. Awesome. See y'all later, everybody.
Bye now.